Well, Charles, I've got to work on the audio fade out for our new countdown timer, but hello.
Great to see you.
Great to see you, and it's Sunday, so here we are.
It's wonderful to be here. I mean, as before, I mean, this art department, I don't want to think about how it motivates itself to come up with this excellent work here. I mean, the looks, the look of the poster, and then the looks on these two faces. I mean, Huma, have I got to do this again? And then Hillary, I mean, that's probably after she's been, destroyed 75 of Bill's glass sculptures in that den of his, and she's probably had ample quantities of Chardonnay. And
is she crushing the sculptures over his head?
That's right, she's calm in that picture. I mean, just well done.
Thank you. Always try to have something interesting there for everyone. It's just, I know I say this every week, Charles, but there's so many things going on. It's kind of like unprecedented news cycle week after week.
It really is. I mean, actually what we could do if we just go right into the slides, and I put this up here as a thought experiment, really.
What do you mean?
Well, had different switches been pulled, had the Russians not been successful in throwing the election, as the Clintons argue, which I think is total rubbish. Hillary Clinton actually might now today be President of the United States. I doubt she'd be over there in North Korea negotiating, in Singapore negotiating with Kim. She would have directed
rockets.
Well, no, she would have directed her various secretaries of surrendering to give in to the demands of all the people around the world, and she wouldn't have had to travel to Singapore. But as we think about what has happened, what truly has happened since November, whatever the date was, 2016, I forget if it was the 7th or 8th, you think about the enormous amount of, in my mind, progress. The fact that Donald Trump today, his approval rating in his first term as president is higher than Reagan's was at the same time,
wow,
and higher than Obama's was at the same time.
Really?
Right. I mean, because often when you have these type of elections, remember, Reagan followed Carter, so you had these disgruntled Democrats who, weren't going to cut Reagan a break, that said he was an idiot actor, and, and then he got shot, he had all kinds of problems. The economy was below the basement. It was in the sub-basement, heading down to the sewer, thanks to Carter. That's the domestic economy. And then the international world was just, idiot. What's his name? Zbigniew Brzezinski. I mean, that guy did
he was
more
sinister
to destroy America's standing in the world between caving to the mullahs in Iran. I mean, he pick a crisis. He's like School of John Brennan. Is it John Brennan? Yeah, School of John Brennan. Pick a crisis, and the man would F it up, right? So it was tough to, for Reagan initially to find the kind of popular appeal that he ultimately did get. And similarly, Obama, to give him some credit for a second, for a small bit of credit, it's left-handed credit, here he comes into office, and Bush really had screwed up. Both Bushes, I would argue, and Clinton.
One of the worst presidents ever.
Right. So we were really about to go over a cliff under Bush. I mean, it had things moved slightly differently, we could well have had the biggest depression ever known. And so here's Obama comes in. Obviously, the Bush fans, the Republicans, were not. I wasn't happy to see Obama in. I think he compounded the problems. But I mean, it's quite something to note that here Donald Trump has a higher approval rating, despite the fact the mainstream press, in the case of Reagan, the mainstream press went after Reagan, really while he was president, and then it took a while after. In the case of Obama, the mainstream press was all in for
They loved
Obama. I
him
mean,
from the
Obama
word
could
go.
throw a gigantic turd in a punch bowl, and the mainstream press would say, "Ah, it tastes pretty good."
It's country style.
It's great. But so, as a thought experiment, as we go through, try to keep in the back of your mind as we go through these pages, our viewers, how different your life would be today if Hillary Clinton were president. Because guess what? It was well known at the time that Huma Abedin, she was being touted as being the second most powerful woman in the world. Had Hillary won,
Wow.
Huma Abedin, a woman who in my mind should never have been allowed inside the White House,
Yeah.
never been allowed access to any of the materials that she reviewed. We still don't know, how many different email accounts Huma Abedin may have had and her allies may have had in, let's say, Arabic names or foreign language. She speaks many foreign languages.
Wow.
Nobody really vetted this person, whether under Clinton. No serious intelligence person ever vetted these people who has America's best interest at heart. And
Right.
Huma Abedin and Hillary Clinton could have been, traveling around the world in Air Force One and Marine One and the presidential motorcades, screwing this country up to a fairly well. And we were pretty close to being completely screwed up as Obama exited the White House. So,
Well, two quick questions though, Charles. Where do we get that approval rating from? Like, who calculates that, and how do we know the accuracy of it?
I just saw an article about it. I don't know. I mean, most approval ratings are statistically not necessarily all that reliable. But if you have the same firm doing the same technique over many time periods,
And it's
at least it's a benchmark.
The same.
I think approval ratings, I would argue, are basically bogus most of the time, because it's tough to find a statistically relevant sample, and then it's the biases of the questioner and
That's what I mean.
and the tendency of somebody to not really reveal. Like, I'll give one small thing that was very funny. I won't say where this happened, because I like to preserve my ability to be semi-anonymous when I go and have my tea and whatever. But at a Starbucks, I'll give you this, in Manhattan,
Yeah.
below 42nd Street. That doesn't give you too much.
Yeah,
I'm
be
sitting
careful.
there, and speaking to the leader of the vast right-wing conspiracy, as I do every morning, typically at 8:30 in the morning. We won't say who that is.
No. I never will.
Yeah, and actually there are many of them, but we have a daily call at 8:30, and I was having fun. I've known this person for a long time. We were talking, and I'm kidding about the vast right-wing conspiracy, or am I? But anyway, so this guy next to me, I thought he was a scruffy. He had unshaven, and he looked, in this particular place, it would be very unusual to say I self-identify as a conservative. So he had overheard what I was talking about with the leader of the vast right-wing conspiracy.
On the phone.
On the phone, because he was
Right.
right next to me. And after I got off the phone, he said, excuse me for asking you this question, but are you conservative? And I looked at him and I was like, am I about to get a knife in my head or something? But I thought, he didn't ask it in a bad way. He said, because I'm a conservative. I feel, this other guy says, I feel like I'm in the center of the wilderness here. There's
should go to
nobody
California.
nobody to talk to.
Yeah.
And so I said, actually, I'm conservative economically, but I'm open-minded socially, and I do say on my website, because I mean it, resist classification. I think it's a big mistake.
Yeah.
To just say, I got to follow, pigeonhole myself. But we had a very nice conversation with this person. I said, so, by the way, may I ask what you do? He said, well, I'm a neurologist, and he said, and these liberals, they're effing crazy.
Well, there's a doctor's opinion, so
Yeah.
I think that's important. The other thing, though, is I do think that Huma Abedin was heavily vetted by Saudi intelligence before they placed her in the State Department.
Either Saudi or actually as
Israeli.
Oh no.
What?
Pakistani.
Ah.
So I think
What's the relationship between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan?
very complicated. But so the issue is, and you got to pronounce it correctly.
Pakistan.
You've got to also sort of, for effect, you've got to say Pakistan.
Okay.
But anyway, over there, I don't know how they would have in that country the scientific knowledge and expertise to create nuclear weapons, but they have them. They have nuclear weapons, and the father of the nuclear weapons program in Pakistan is an infamous criminal.
What?
Who absolutely, and they are constantly in the business of trying to sell these bombs around the world to hostile interests, and there's a suspicion that the Pakistani intelligence military people may have transferred this knowledge to countries like Saudi Arabia. Is a suspicion, but I'm not a military expert, so I don't know.
Right.
But no, and they have there's the civilian government in Pakistan, which gets into trouble with the military government from time to time, and then there's this ISI, the security services, which are they're husky. And the difference in Pakistan is that you don't have to. There's no consular or Kubi or you name it. No lawyer standing up there and say you can't torture, my client. It's like torture is the national sport over there. I mean, you get in trouble, you're going to be tortured. And they regularly, they have an election. They regularly throw the previous people in prison, and then they wait for the next election and take that person out. I have a friend actually who was finance minister. I think he was finance minister of Pakistan for a while, and then he went to prison. Now he's dead.
Now he's dead?
Yeah, still dead.
From being in prison or what?
No, just from dying.
As you're talking about Pakistan there, Charles, I can't help but be reminded of, we talk about lawyers in Pakistan. There's actually 2 lawyers that we know that have interacted with a Pakistani individual who has become all too familiar of late. And of course, I'm speaking about, I don't know if this guy can still be considered a lawyer after having to relinquish his law license for some of his various...
I think he's a liar.
A liar. Well, so of course, Bill Clinton, we know, is familiar with Mr. Imran Awan, although when questioned about it, of course, at Barnes & Noble, all he really had to say was, I don't know anything about that.
And that crime. That's a good imitation.
Yeah, he was excited to not know anything about it. But he admits that he knows Chris Gowan. And I think many people heard this really epic phone call I had with Chris Gowan about his insights into inadvertent disclosure and Diet Coke delivery. It boggles the mind, Charles. I don't know. I know you're very busy, and I'm not sure if you've had an opportunity to hear that, but I can't understand why an alleged lawyer would get on the phone and say all that stuff. It seems like sort of no upside.
Well, it's like anything else, I think, in the legal business. The difference between an excellent corporate attorney and a schlub, it's a chasm. I mean, it's a very big difference. And as my parents were fond of saying to me to motivate me, there's a bottom half of every class, and even if it's all smart kids, you're going to have the bottom 50%. Some just don't take to school; they don't enjoy school or whatever.
Right.
But in the case of being a lawyer, not only do you actually have to get into law school, you have to graduate from law school, then you have to pass the bar. And as we know, we have a world where these idiots will put together lists of the smartest lawyers in the world and say that Hillary Clinton, who couldn't pass the bar exam and had to go down to, I think it was Arkansas, to get the special Arkansas marking treatment to pass the bar exam, and judging by her behavior.
What kind of treatment?
The special, you passed. But I didn't take the test yet. Yeah, you passed.
Like from the same people who help her trade cattle futures.
Yeah, we'll set you up. You need a house? Chappaqua. Need another one? Mansion. No problem. Want to be president? We'll do that too. You just, you get in the job and you do what we say.
Who says crime doesn't pay, Charles? I think it must pay quite well, or it would have gone out of business a long time ago.
Well, it pays, but then, we'll see how well it pays. Well, we're going to have a discussion about pay.
I think it's that boomerang that's a bitch.
It is.
Karma gets you every time. So, back to the slides, Charles.
Yeah, why don't we rock through them, and if we go to the second one, we'll quickly remind people, particularly we're getting more viewers, I guess, with every broadcast.
Right. Well, I mean, of course, most people who've been watching for a while are aware that Crowdsource the Truth has come under malicious attack on YouTube that's resulted in streaming being cut off, and then Crowdsource the Crowdsource the Truth 2 streaming being cut off. So we're streaming live now on periscope.tv/CS the Truth, on the 21st Century 3D YouTube channel, on vk.com. Privyet, Moscow, how you doing?
How you doing?
How you doing? And also, of course, our sponsors on patreon.com/crowdsource the truth are getting their live streaming feed through Vimeo. So any of the shenanigans on what seems to be like a controlled environment on YouTube, and I'm not necessarily blaming Google, but there are definitely people who have studied that and learned how to take advantage of some of the algorithms and maybe exploit some of the things that YouTube is doing to their benefit. So it's important that people become sponsors and they can get uninterrupted live streams.
Good. Well, that's very important, and you appreciate particularly the sponsorship.
Yes.
So one of the things that we like to remind people about is we are producing this show from the United States of America, where the First Amendment right does still exist, and we base our analysis of the substantive matters that we talk about in each of these slide presentations based upon actual facts. We go out there and we look for facts as opposed to listening to CNN, MSNBC, and even considering wasting money to read, say, the New York Times, the failing New York Times.
Yes.
And what we try to do, this is really, when we say it was Jason's invention, Crowdsource the Truth, this is not me lecturing you. This is me trying to expose, and Jason tried to expose things for you to consider, and then dive in, learn for yourself. Maybe we're wrong. Maybe you've got a better way of looking at it. If so, please do contact us. You can do it on Twitter. You can do it on my website. And keep the thoughts short.
Right.
You missed X, Y, and Z, or you could do it this way better. And if you've got supporting analysis, send as much as you want.
Right.
But don't ask us to wade through a 20-page email, because we're not going to do that.
Well, the other thing that might be worth mentioning, Charles, is that a Twitter response or an email that contains facts and alternative data, alternative information, which is, I believe, what Kellyanne Conway meant to say when she had that little verbal gaffe and said alternative facts. I think she meant alternative information. Interpretation. Alternative information that could be directly opposite to what we're saying could be correct, but mere insults and telling me, or I don't think anybody says this to you, but just saying, hey, you're dumb or you've got this wrong, doesn't help.
Yeah, and anyway, we're very interested, I think Jason and I and people in the crowdsource community, we recognize that it's difficult to ferret out the truth, and that's why we like to do it together with you. And when we find something and we present something that you like and you feel that is important, go out. What I always do when I tweet, generally, if I remember to do it, is I put @CSTheTruth, and that means it automatically goes to the almost 60,000 subscribers you now have, I think.
Well, on Twitter, it's 23 or something.
23,000?
Like that. Yeah.
And so it's very useful to tweet these things back and forth. I actually am starting to get a very interesting set of information in my Twitter feed, and I encourage people to go on it and read it for yourselves. And I do have a very strict policy. Anybody who tries the ad hominem argument or silly, you're immediately blocked. There's a one strike and you're out.
No probation period.
No probation. You never come back.
Yeah. It's a strict no BS
it's the
policy.
same policy I have towards cream of wheat. I won't eat it.
Now, Charles, for people who have been disrupted by this malicious YouTube strike campaign, we've made it easy for people to find all of the Sunday with Charles episodes, whether they were streamed out on the original Crowdsource the Truth channel or Crowdsource the Truth 2 or even 21st Century 3D. They're all here on our original channel, which technically is titled Jason Goodman, but this is the original Crowdsource the Truth channel. And we've got both Sunday with Charles and Charles Ortel is closing in episodes in here. So people who don't want to have to search around for the latest programming can just go right to the playlist. And our most recent episode of Closing In was, of course, with Dr. Corsi. I always enjoy speaking to the doctor, and people can catch up on anything they might have missed. And it's also important for people to remember that we're not necessarily planning this show to be a traditional entertainment or even traditional news broadcast. It's more about presenting the almost overwhelming amount of evidence in a way that investigators and people who are prosecuting, hopefully, some of these crimes can get it all in one spot and verify by downloading the presentations that you prepare each week. And I've gone through, I believe we've got them all linked in the video descriptions on YouTube, and people can download that, check the sources, dig deeper, whatever they might want to do.
Well, thank you for that. And that's we also, I am delinquent in putting together a summary of each of these, going back over the full and try to organize. And I will do that. I know I say that every week and I forget to do it. But
you know what? I'm guilty of forgetting to upload some of our summary videos in the new series that we've started, 90 Seconds with Charles Ortel. So I'll get on top of that and we'll keep it going. But we're both very busy, so it's hard to sometimes remember to do all this stuff.
Well, you did very accurately point out that the news flow is overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so with that, we might just get right into it. We don't necessarily need to pull all of these links up. You could do that in the audience at your leisure. We will pull some of the more important ones up. But this meeting that Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un are going to have in Singapore is really something else. I mean, it is for all the experts. I loved before Trump got on the plane to go over to I think G7. That idiot Chuck E. Cheese Schumer, the senior senator from New York, lambasted Trump for not consulting him. And Trump said, fired back either in a tweet or somehow. He said, why would I consult with you? You haven't gotten this right in decades.
Exactly.
What do I need to learn from you on this?
Yeah. I mean, what an obnoxious putz. It's funny. For a long time, Charles, I've been saying I personally think it would be interesting to involve Dennis Rodman for no reason other than the man has a friendship.
He's there.
I know.
Yeah.
And now he's there. So I really think they should make Dennis Rodman into the ambassador to North Korea.
Well, that would be pretty funny.
I mean, it would be, but when you hear all of these, so-called experts talking about how, that's crazy and how could he possibly, do that, it's like, well, I mean, you experts haven't been able to get it right ever, so let him try. Honestly, Dennis Rodman has made more diplomatic headway in North Korea than any ambassador or politician or whatever. So I never really followed him when he was playing basketball. I'm not really...
The Worm?
Huh?
I think his nickname was The Worm. He was a great basketball player.
Yeah, exactly. I think he's got like the all-time record of rebounds or something he's a super expert at, and obviously he's a very sensational guy. But point is, he's obviously, he's made headway with Kim Jong-un, and Kim, I saw in an interview, is very good at basketball himself. So he was a fan of Rodman. We see him here with President Trump. They're friends because Rodman was on The Apprentice.
Celebrity Apprentice, right?
Yeah. And so, I don't know, it makes sense to me. The guy's had diplomatic success there, at least make him some sort of, I mean, they're doing it, as you said, so it's good.
So to expose the double standard, if you may remember, Trump is being ridiculed for the notion that he would involve Dennis Rodman. Well, let's go back, roll back the videotape. Remember what happened at the Charlie Hebdo massacre?
They walked in and shot everybody up.
But you remember what happened, what the I think it was John Kerry's response.
Oh.
Was what?
I don't remember.
To send James Taylor over there and sing "You've Got a Friend."
Oh boy.
That was that was really inspiring. We've lost I don't know how many dead people. We've had an unbelievable massacre. Thanks for bringing. I like James Taylor's music. He's fantastic. But come on.
Yeah.
How about
I don't
wiping
like John
out?
Kerry.
I don't like John Kerry.
No.
Lurch. Don't like him.
No, don't like him at all. But
Do like this guy, though. He's got to grow on you.
one thing that I heard someone comment on the news was that he's exactly the same in person as he is on these news segments. So, I mean, I guess that's sort of something that everybody knew, but it's also refreshing because Hillary admits to having her public persona and her separate private persona, which I think her public persona is pretending to be nice and her private persona is destroying civilization. So hopefully.
I don't like either of the personas.
Exactly. So much
Anyway,
for that.
and then as for this G7 meeting, you know, we're going to show you why it was a correct, and Jason and I drafted these slides before we knew the outcome of the G7. But when we think about, as New Yorkers, when we think about the disruption that the UN causes in New York every September and October for the annual meeting, all these people who don't pay taxes in New York, you don't pay any federal, state taxes as a multilateral employee, right? You're above all that. So then we have to guard you, and we got to get out of the way as you spend, who knows how you get the money on all these expensive restaurants and productions, and then you don't pay your parking tickets, and you leave your limousines double parked. And you know, it's really fantastic to have the privilege of your operating here from New York, where you seem to do absolutely nothing right. I mean, is the world safer today in 2018 than it was in 1945? Certainly not. You know, and we have the UN to pay for, and they're supposedly taking, you know, charge of all these matters. Right. Now we have the G7 and the G20, and we have these other, you know, ridiculous boondoggle organizations, WHO, all this kind of stuff, and nobody actually is checking their effectiveness. They stand above national law. They have every reason to have excuses to meddle here and meddle there. And I think Donald Trump is the first American president who's basically saying, you know, enough is enough of all this. You know, he went to the G7 meeting. He wasn't, he made a fair point to say, you know, I'm here, I get it. Why isn't Russia here?
Yeah.
I mean, why is Canada there? Why is Canada hosting it and not Russia? Right? It just, I take the point that, you know, Crimea and all that in Ukraine, but as Trump correctly pointed out, you know, why do you think the Russians were emboldened to go into the Ukraine and to Crimea? It's all because of first Hillary Clinton's errors, and then John Kerry's errors, and Barack Obama's errors, handling that whole mess in the first place.
Do we want to talk about President Trump's tweet here about Justin Trudeau?
Yeah, I think we could do on that.
Where was it that you heard the quote, Charles, about Justin's new nickname?
So it was pretty funny. I have a follower, I will, out of deference to this particular follower, who can later then tell me whether I could use the name or not. A follower sent me a direct message overnight or this morning saying that in China, apparently, Trump has several nicknames, which are like the Great Commander, Mighty Donald, and the nickname for Trudeau in Canada is Little Potato.
So we've modified that a little bit to be the Castro Potato Head. So there he is. I kind of like that image. It's in competition for driving Miss Crazy of the best meme of this show.
It's well done, well done. But I think, as we'll show you shortly, most people I've found, and maybe Jason, in your case is the same, most people recoil at trying to understand economics, and they don't like big numbers, and, you know, they look at this, you come at this from a standpoint of saying, you know, in America we're all created equal. That means that, I suppose, that all nations are created equal. Not so much. I mean, all nations are not equal. Some nations, unfortunately, just cannot get their act together. Take Haiti as an example, or Venezuela as an example, or arguably North Korea as an example, or Somalia. There's some nations that have been created for whatever reason in a place where it's going to be extremely difficult for those nations, absent fundamental change, to hope to compete against the other nations that are out there that had their act together. And one of those nations that we will show you in a second that really is getting its act together is this nation, the United States of America, which is by far and away the biggest in economic terms and the strongest in military terms.
Yeah.
And so it's not a nation to be sort of insulted.
Trifled with?
Trifled with. And, this idea that Donald Trump should go up there and listen to a bunch of happy BS from Justin Trudeau, and we're going to be digging in this week in an article. Justin Trudeau is the son, he's a dynastic politician, son of a man who created a Trudeau Foundation. And wouldn't you know that this older foundation, right before Justin became Prime Minister of Canada, suddenly started getting all kinds of contributions. Right? And it's bigger than the Clinton Foundation. So here's a guy, the son of a former prime minister, the benefit of a big name up there, a loony. I mean, to call him liberal is not fair to liberals. He's a loony. That's actually the name.
He's the son of a Cuban dictator.
Right, but actually the loony is the informal slang name for the Canadian currency. And I think in this case, that's what traders call it. They call it the loony. And in this case, call a prime minister a loony. I think the people in Canada are ready for a change. They were ready for a change well before this loony guy got into power. And what Justin Trudeau did, he is going to rue the day that he ever put a knife in the back of the American delegation and trifled with Trump. It may play well in a portion of the Canadian audience. That's really going to do well for you, Justin. You hope to be one of the biggest economies in the world. You don't take on your biggest trading partner. Canada needs the United States far more than we need them. And I'm sure we'll end up with amicable relations in the end after Trudeau is displaced from power, which will happen, I think.
Wow.
But Trump has made some very, very interesting points here in this latest G7, and I'm sure we'll have Richard Haass, head of the Council on Foreign Relations, and all his cohorts on Morning Schmo, decrying Donald Trump's latest performance. How could he blow up the G7? I mean, he didn't blow up a plane. He blew up a conference where nothing actually ever happens. It's all that productive. And it's a redundant conference on top of the G20, on top of the UN, on top of what we pay good money for here in this country, our own government. So I think it's time to start thinking, why do we need to have all these multilateral, ineffective bureaucracy?
Now, Charles, that's the second time in today's broadcast that you've brought up the Council on Foreign Relations, and it causes me to think about this guy who is also the father of Morning Joe's wife and co-host.
Soon-to-be wife, right? They're not married yet.
Oh, sorry. But Zbigniew Brzezinski. Now, I think when you were talking about him related to Carter, you described him as incompetent, but I think sometimes when someone is competent but working in the opposite direction you expect them to be, it can be masked as incompetence. I think it's more like sabotage, but I don't think the Council on Foreign Relations is a good thing for the United States.
It started out as a decent idea, but it's got a fair amount of money and undue influence, frankly.
Right.
I went in my youth. Dylan Reed helped in a minor way fund the Council on Foreign Relations. The Dylan family were very much in favor of it. And so what would happen is you'd pay a certain amount of money to be a member, a corporate member, and then they get all these invitations for, you get 4 seats to a dinner or something like that. And Dylan Reed, the internal people were constantly saying, would you mind going to this dinner? We can't get anybody to go to these stupid dinners.
Did you go?
Oh yeah, I went a few times.
Wow.
And it was interesting.
Well, I gotta hear about that.
Yeah, no, it was. I mean, look, people who run institutions like the Council on Foreign Relations, you get some experience running these. I mean, what's not to like about a dinner you don't have to pay for, free drinks, and you get to meet a bunch of people, and
right.
And so, but it does definitely have a left-leaning global. It certainly is a globalist institution.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost the definition of globalism, isn't it?
In fact, somebody back in the '80s, somebody said, "You should join. It'd be easy for you to get in." And so I asked a few friends, and a guy whose judgment I really trust, he said, "Why would you join that?" Because even back in the '80s, it was going the wrong way. So we have the question here, and it might be worth pulling this one up. Yeah, that one there. This just came out. Let's see. Yeah, updated this morning. I don't know if that's English time. Oh no, Eastern time.
Eastern, yeah. 6:44.
So apparently there's an issue. It came out in the Sunday Times of London, and now it's being picked up in the Daily Mail, that one of the financiers behind Brexit is being revealed as somebody who got benefits after the fact from an offer to be involved in 6 gold mines in Russia. And so they're running with this story of like, oh, the Brexit vote was all tainted, the Brexit vote was all tainted. I would like to remind the audience that Barack Obama, as president, I think, went to England and said, you must understand, he campaigned vigorously against Brexit and said, if Britain votes for Brexit, that they will fall at the back of the line for any bilateral negotiations with the United States of America. Now, if that is not meddling in an international referendum using American taxpayer funds, I don't know what is meddling. And I think it is fair to say in these various, many, many referenda that are operating around the world, we have elections that are operating around the world. It is crystal clear that Brennan and Clapper and the people behind Obama and the Clintons and the Bushes, they are all in for unregulated globalism, and they are going to, meddle, try to shape minds, young minds in universities and others, using the media to embrace this, fuzzy concept of globalism. I mean, how could you be against globalism? You got globalism and you got puppies, right? Both are great. No, globalism, unregulated globalism, is a means to crush order in countries around the world, and it is a concept which has enabled corruption to flourish between the political classes, the donor classes, the investors, the bankers, etc. It must be exposed. It's in the process of being exposed for what it truly is. And no, this is not a bombshell involving Brexit. It's not.
Yeah. It
happens on both sides.
Yeah, and they're urging MI5 to act. So, any vote that they don't like has been rigged.
Right.
And any vote that they like is totally legit.
Yeah. Or another, I think another catchphrase for unregulated globalism is one that was worn on a T-shirt up in Millbrook, New York, where I used to live, where people didn't walk around with these type of T-shirts. A friend of mine would walk around with T-shirts that would say, "The beatings will stop when morale improves." Yeah. That's globalism, right? Shut up.
Yep. Absolutely.
So now we have, you brought up the Tommy Robinson thing. This is interesting here, the fourth, that one. Apparently Geert Wilders, who is of course the person in, I think, Holland, who I think he lost at trial for challenging radical Islam. He has gone into England, and there's this massive crowd demanding that this fellow Tommy Robinson be released from prison.
He really should be. If some people, when we did the first story, when he was arrested, were like, oh, he's got a record and he deserves to be in jail. But when you look at the facts, the police have been harassing this guy since he started. So this is part of what they like to try to do. If they can stick you in jail once, now all they have to say is, oh, well, this guy's, got a record, so he deserves to be in jail. But it's just one ginned up charge after the next.
But note to Geert, who I think is a very interesting and courageous person, he's obviously never seen Captain Kangaroo.
Yeah.
Right? Does that not look like Captain Kangaroo from beyond?
Well, I don't know if he's ever seen the back of his own toupee either, but it's not that convincing. If that's his real hair, he needs to check that as well. I don't mean to insult the guy. He's probably doing something good if he's trying to help Tommy Robinson. And obviously a lot of people viewing this video, 187,000 views from just yesterday. And look at all the people there. Even if you dislike Tommy Robinson and his message, you do need to be outraged that this is the way that people are being treated. And Tommy Robinson's problems began when he started exposing the radical Islamic aspects of the migrant problem and how it's affecting local law there in the United Kingdom. It's really not acceptable.
Exactly, and I think it's more than a bit ironic that in the kingdom or the country that gave birth to Sir Francis Bacon, who was the founder. No,
I'm sorry. Anytime Frank Bacon gets mentioned,
no, it's a different one.
yeah,
This would be the
I know the real one.
a very serious philosopher, scientist, politician, etc. I mean, some give him credit with creating the discipline of scientific inquiry. I mean, so he's a very, very famous, noteworthy creature.
Right, and the less noteworthy guy I'm talking about just stole that because that's their method. They like to co-opt other people's credibility because they don't have any of their own.
Right. But it's more than a bit ironic that you would have this problem today in England, where if a certain crowd doesn't like what you're going to say, they just stamp you out and now put you in jail.
Right.
For making observations, and I think that's a very dangerous place for a society to end up.
Yeah.
And I would hope that England, the United Kingdom, would get its act together here.
They got to release them.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, I think they owe them reparations because, like anyone who gets into these legal jam-ups, the guy's lost property and he's lost time with his children. He's been in jail. He's been beaten up in jail. He's in danger of being killed there. That's a real serious issue that's got to stay in the news until he's released.
Now, one thing that we're going to be increasingly exposing over the course, with luck, over the course of the next several months and years, is the degree to which the United States, starting under H.W. Bush and then continuing under Bill Clinton, W. Bush, and Obama, has allowed or tolerated, maybe even enabled, the theft of intellectual property and now military secrets.
Whoa.
By China and India in particular. And I flagged them, others have stolen, but I flagged these two nations because we're going to be doing a quick comparison of the G7 nations and certain other nations, China, India, to give you a sense of how different their position is economically and how much of a threat China and India could ultimately pose one day, potentially, to the United States and the West. I don't understand, there's no good reason why we're tolerant of thefts of intellectual property, other than if you think back to the Clinton years, the degree to which people associated with the Chinese government were funneling campaign cash into the Clinton coffers. And we all know we've been exposing the American India Foundation and its connection to crooked people in India, including the now out of prison, but the convicted felon Rajat Gupta, who ran one of the largest consulting firms in the world, McKinsey, and perhaps during his tenure facilitated the transfer of corporate know-how and actual secrets into India, enabling the supposed miracle of India Inc. These are very serious things, and we have this curious approach where, on the one hand, we want to encourage STEM, which is what's
science, technology, engineering, and math.
And math, particularly women in this country.
Yeah.
But why wouldn't we want to encourage that across men and women, and particular American? Why would we not want to have a thriving, culture here of invention and encouraging people? Whatever India is doing in the classroom, we can do 15 times better.
Stem cell technology, not related to the science, technology, but emerging technologies. Charles, there's one thing here that immediately jumps out at me, this number. I don't know if people watching fully appreciate the massive quantity of data represented by 614 gigabytes. Can I put that into context for you, Charles?
Sure.
This computer right here has a it's a 1 terabyte hard drive. So that's is it a 1 terabyte? Wait, am I getting confused?
No, I don't think it's a
No,
terabyte.
it's 1 gigabyte, the hard drive here. A terabyte is a huge amount of space. I got a 48 gigabyte. Is it gigabyte? I'm getting confused now. No, it's terabytes, 48 terabytes. But that's still a huge number. That's half of 1 terabyte. So that's basically half of the information. Let me make sure. Yeah, it's 1 terabyte drive here. So half of everything on a full computer. This could be videos, engineering plans, forget about documents, text documents. I was just, while you were contemplating this article, I looked up how much data is in the entire Library of Congress. and that is basically regarded to be the most commonly referred to number is 10 terabytes, I believe. So there we go. So
it's a lot of information.
this is a substantial percentage of all the information in the Library of Congress. I mean, you could fit virtually, I mean, you know, that could be every engineering schematic for several sophisticated military weapons, you know, NASA technology, medical technology. That's astounding. 614 gigabytes is like a full hard drive of information.
Yeah. So, you know, we need to start considering the massive amount of, when we talk about job losses, we talk about damages to national, you know, forget about China and India blowing us off the map militarily, because I don't think that's going to happen.
Stealing all our information
But-
and killing us economically.
Yeah, I mean, and that could really, that hurts every one of us. So why aren't we a lot more upset about this
Yeah,
than chasing the Russian collusion delusion,
right.
you know? So if we go back into the slides,
I guess Robert Mueller still needs a job.
now, we had this story here about Allie Watkins. If we pull up the shot, yeah. This is striking to me on many, many levels. Now, I hope this gentleman is not married.
This is this woman who is working for the New York Times?
Well, first she was working for multiple different places, and apparently, you know, developed
Well,
an
look who's
intimate
here.
relationship, not with Comey, but with this
I
guy.
know, with Wolf, but he's, you know,
Right.
he's Comey standing behind his man there.
Right. And, you know, remember we had all these problems with leaks.
Yeah.
And now this man, Wolf, has been indicted for making a false statement to an FBI agent, and more than one. As a guess, the FBI, the good people in the FBI have been on this now for a while, and this will not be the only leaker exposed here. There's been a torrent of leaks, particularly after Trump won the election, and then as he got set up and was inaugurated as president. And because, you know, the preceding staff was still there, this guy was still there. This guy
He's been there for 30 years on
Right.
the Senate Intelligence Committee. And that's one of the most sensitive committees in all of Congress, and this dude is leaking.
right.
And having sex with the New York Times reporter who's like, how much younger than him?
That's fine. I mean,
I agree.
Yeah.
But still,
but
is she in love with this guy, or is she somehow trying to get leaks?
and what is with this whole Washington D.C. sexing, texting, and leaking?
They're
stuff?
all having sex with each other. It's crazy.
You know, how do you text, have sex, do your job, did what? You know,
Right.
And it's really something to me, and it does explain why, you know, people like me do not even like to go near Washington D.C. It's just, it is. I'm not a prude or anything, but it's just. It is so dirty and so corrupt. Everybody's got an angle. People will say the same thing about New York, but we don't have we're not the, you know, nation's political capital here. We have our problems with finance and fashion and media, but we're not scheming to take over the world and do what these people in Washington D.C. seem to do. So, I mean, this to me should give rise to questions of ethics in journalism.
Yeah.
You know, is it ethical? If people at the New York Times knew about this affair,
Right.
you know, if they didn't know about the affair, you know, I suppose I could understand why. But if they did know about it, why did they allow this to continue?
Isn't there some famous quote from some New York Times editor that says, like, hey, if you're having sex with an elephant, you're not covering the circus, or something like that?
I don't know about that
Something
one.
like that. But, I mean, you know, this is particularly odd because didn't this girl also work for BuzzFeed at some point?
Yeah.
So it causes me to wonder, is BuzzFeed maybe like the Filene's basement of the New York Times, where they can blow out all the crap through BuzzFeed, and then New York Times can say, well, BuzzFeed said this, we don't know. It's
Then you
not."
put it in the Steele dossier.
And then get BuzzFeed sued. Like, see, I see all these tactics happening that are the same exact tactics that the sort of losers on the internet are using, where some anonymous person will post some utter nonsense to 4chan, and then all these people will report like, oh, well, 4chan says X, Y, and Z. And then they're like, I didn't say it. I didn't. That's not, slander or whatever. I'm just reporting what 4chan said. And that seems to be what they're doing here. I'm very suspicious of this Allie Watkins person and her relationship with our friend Mr. Wolf here. He seems to be a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Yeah, he's got those evil eyes.
Yeah, he's a crooked dude. 30 years on the Senate Intelligence Committee, and he's illegally leaking. How stupid is that?
Well, I have heard people explain to me, people more familiar with Washington explain to me that the Senate Intelligence Committee has notoriously long been under suspicion.
Wow.
It consists of, on the Republican side, it's never Trumpers, and the Democrats act in unison. And so there are lots of blemishes on the Senate Intelligence Committee, and I hope if Republicans pick up seats in the Senate, in the November elections, that they reconfigure who is on this Senate Intelligence Committee, and that we fully expose what actually may have happened here. I don't think Wolf is the only leaker.
Oh, well, I agree. Charles, if I'm not mistaken, one of my least favorite guys, you're talking about the pedigree of craziness in the Senate Intelligence Committee. I do believe that Lyndon Johnson was the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee for some time.
Really?
I think so. I
Wow.
think that was how he, let's just look that up. I think that was how he kind of got in with all the Halliburton, KBR type stuff. We'll have to look into that further, but his misuse of the intelligence community. I'm pretty sure he was on the Senate Intelligence Committee, and Lyndon Johnson rose to great power as a senator before he became one of the most disgusting and corrupt presidents of these United States.
So you like him?
Don't like him.
I couldn't tell.
Yeah.
So Judicial Watch is doing its great work as usual, and they're going to they've apparently got some new Clinton Lynch tarmac communications that were not previously supplied in after previous Freedom of Information Act requests.
That's bombshell.
So this is useful stuff, but they're just relentless.
Yeah.
And I think should be encouraged and supported.
I was trying to broker a détente between Larry Klayman and Tom Fitton, but I don't know if we're going to be able to see that. I think.
Well, you could ask Donald Trump to do that for you after he sorts out Korea.
That's right. That's what I was sort of feeling like. If we're in this kind of conciliatory mood, maybe there's some. Because I think those two entities would be more powerful together than at odds with one another. But I get it.
You digress.
People fight. Yeah.
So anyway, if we could keep on ripping through here. Now,
two favorite guys, Charles.
Yeah, this.
Wait.
That's the right one. That's right.
Oh, it is.
Yeah. So this Triple Crown winner, Justified, I think, or Justify, was historic. There was a rumor that supposedly George Soros was the money behind this. I don't know if that's true or false yet, but I think. Here's the case where if you believe in a higher power, we have this, it's tough to win the Triple Crown. And here you have a horse named Justify win it, and it is well past time for Mueller and Rosenstein to justify what in the hell they are actually doing with this Russian collusion now shifting to maybe targeting Israel for being involved somehow. I mean, this is just nuts.
Involved in what?
Well, as happened with the Monica Lewinsky investigation, the Starr investigation, it went from being one thing to being another thing. But in this case, lawyers tell me that the actual basis upon which the Mueller probe was launched was all wrong.
Well,
they didn't pick a specific crime. They're investigating people. It's been mishandled, and for many, many reasons, it is well past time for Mueller to explain himself, for Mueller to have a real boss, and for Rosenstein to explain himself, and beyond that, for Sessions to explain why he has tolerated, why he recused himself, and why he's selected Rosenstein, and who actually vetted this Rosenstein? I mean, I'm just an individual looking through public records, and I see so many defects in Rosenstein's track record, long track record with Comey and others, and Mueller, of failing to see the Clinton Foundation frauds when they escalated between 2001 and 2005, failing to see laureate education for what it is, which is, I think, another Ponzi scheme, failure to catch the Clinton-Bush-Haiti frauds, failure to catch the Clinton Global Initiative joint venture, now university, with laureate fraud, failure to catch the real extent of what was going on with Uranium One, failure to get behind the real developments involving Anna Chapman and rounding up that spy ring and then letting the spies fly back to Russia. I mean, you go on, failures to catch Ramboxy to its full extent.
Failure to not look crazy in this photograph.
Yeah, and I mean, it is well past time for people across the political spectrum to look at this Mueller-Rosenstein thing and to understand that this kind of mayhem could happen to, in another roll of the dice, it could happen to a liberal or a progressive in the same way. We can't have, a Department of Injustice.
Right.
We can't have a very special, prosecutor or counselor or whatever he is, in Mr. Mueller, who seems to be, as adept at Rosenstein as effing things up. I mean, this guy, it was sold to, initially, shame on me, I heard, he had Purple Heart, Vietnam.
Rosenstein?
No.
Mueller. Yeah.
And, he's wide bipartisan support. And what do you see is the truth? You read Sidney Powell's book, License to Lie. Mueller is a disaster, Rosenstein's a disaster, Sessions is a disaster, and it is high time, it is past time for Donald Trump to put his very large feet down and say, enough of this, guys. You're making a mockery of the law. We're going to have a thorough house cleaning at Justice, thorough house cleaning at the IRS, put in acting heads of these departments if you can't get them through Congress, and run on it through the election. Make this a central issue in the elections coming up, that sick and tired of having these Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama holdovers F things up and cover up epic corruption involving the Clinton Foundation, the Clintons themselves, maybe the Bush family, likely the Obama people. These are people in the holdovers in the Justice Department who are doing the bidding of the losing side in the 2016 election. Enough is enough.
Now, Charles, I'm pretty sure I saw this on, maybe it was on Fox, but Louis Gohmert was on there, and he was basically saying that Robert Mueller was the worst FBI director in history. And although Robert Mueller is terrible, it's a toss-up between him and J. Edgar Hoover. I like Louis Gohmert, but Hoover was pretty damn bad.
Well, what about Comey?
Comey was pretty bad. I mean, Hoover was, by many accounts, pivotal in covering up the JFK assassination and blackmailing basically everybody in Washington, D.C. with lots of salacious information. So as far as who's worse, that's a tough race to call. But Mueller's pretty bad. I particularly question Mueller's cover-up of Senator Bob Graham's report. He was the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee during 9/11, and he compiled a report that for about 15 years he was imploring the government to release this 28-page Senate Intelligence Committee report on 9/11, which implicated 3 Saudi Arabian diplomats in key financing. So, yeah, Mueller, he's the one who should be being investigated, not him investigating Trump.
Well, let's hope that happens.
Right.
Actually. So, now, Mr. Soros. Here we have, this is a hysterical article here. And I have actually been interviewed for Sputnik and other Russian sources suggesting, they asked me, where are some places where Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump can find common ground? Investigate George Soros for charity fraud, for political corruption. I am deeply suspicious of his track record, and I wonder about these people who operate, in theory, large charities and large funds. Here's a guy who has profited from adversity. He's created mayhem across, and Soros, mayhem across the former Soviet Union, developing world, now in the United States. He has gotten away with all kinds of stuff.
Didn't he try to crash the British pound?
Oh, yeah, that's how he made his, I think his first billion doing exactly that. Now, there's nothing wrong necessarily with speculating against the government. Boy, that's not a flattering picture.
Well, he's just a terrible looking guy. I mean, there's nothing to be done about it.
I mean, we should do a crowdfund account to get those bags sent to the Samsonite repackaging department. Honestly, he looks like a turkey.
He's not a handsome man.
Right? The turkey eyes or whatever, that's not a good look.
No.
But seriously, Soros is persona non grata in Russia and the former Soviet Union. And
Macedonia. Right? Or no, where's he from?
He's from Hungary.
Hungary, sorry.
But he, apparently in this interview, Mail didn't pick it up quite this way, Zero Hedge picked it up this way, he criticized Hillary Clinton for being a school marm, which, that's rich. So why'd you finance her, George? Why'd you finance Chelsea's wedding? Why'd you let the wedding happen on your estate up there in Rhinebeck, New York? And then he attacked Donald Trump for being a narcissist who might blow up the world. And that's like, we're talking about you, George, when we say that. A narcissist who is actually trying to blow up the world and make money doing it.
Right. Charles, what about this 60 Minutes interview with George Soros in which he admitted, he's not a Nazi, but he worked for them. So, I mean, he's Jewish by heritage, but in this interview, if people haven't seen it, they should Google George Soros 60 Minutes interview. He admits that he was working with the Nazis, confiscating property from Jews.
When he was 15.
Right, going around terrorizing people. Pretty bad.
That's right.
And he continues to, in that interview, he goes on and says that his business decisions aren't motivated by morality and ethics. They can't be. And I didn't really understand that. I don't understand why you can't do business and be moral and ethical at the same time.
No, this is the antithesis of what should be rewarded in the greatest country on earth, is this man's track record. And I think it is well past time for Donald Trump, his Justice Department, the IRS to look. I could tell you that in 2004, an entity called the Soros Foundation made a $1 million grant to a charity that doesn't exist, the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative. I have the paperwork on it.
That alone could put him in jail.
And then when I looked through, it's past small beer for his large foundations, but I looked through where he claimed he was making grants, and I recognized as one worthy recipient a horseback riding supply store, which is not, it was probably an accounting error that they put a personal bill down as a grant in his foundation. But I mean, this is something, the IRS, the charity department needs to go very much into detail on each of the charities, the supposed charities that is organized by Soros through his Open Society group of foundations, and then through Media Matters and other things, which he's been funding. These things are not charities, and they're certainly not nonpartisan charities. And this man and his private foundations, he sends just a horrible record, a horrible message to future generations that you can get away with this crap,
right,
and be lionized. I mean, there are actually people in the mainstream media who think this guy is wonderful.
Yeah, that he's a philanthropist, and why are you picking on him and everything. And I even have friends who say that, who think, oh, he's just a billionaire and you're blaming everything on Soros. And he's a terrible guy.
He's not the only one who's a problem, but this guy is a real problem. Plus, he cheats at tennis.
Right, the foot fault.
One of my personally vouch for that.
One of my favorite stories of all time is Charles calling a foot fault on Soros.
Yeah. And so here, this story here, as we're going to show in depth, and this is really interesting. Look, this story got 20,800 shares, and it's only what, a day old bread, not even a full day old. And
how could you dislike what Trump is saying? I mean, this is true. We're the piggy bank that everybody's robbing.
Well, you dislike it if you're, Canada,
Right, if you're one of the people with your hands in the jar.
Yeah.
Oh, this picture is just great, Charles.
I know.
You should get a T-shirt of this. I mean, this literally could not be staged better than what we've got here. And Trump has really legitimately become good friends with Shinzo Abe, the Prime Minister of Japan, and I guess we can understand Mr. Abe's motivation for wanting a tight relationship with the country that's able to put some pressure on North Korea. Japan has had more nuclear accidents and attacks than any other country that I'm aware of, and so obviously they're very concerned about getting North Korea under control. But look at the demeanor of Mr. Abe and Mr. Trump versus Angela Merkel and all of these other scruffies who are standing there. I must admit, I am not very fond of Mr. What's his name
Bolton.
with the mustache? Bolton, exactly. Don't like that guy.
I don't know. I sort of like him. But
I
then
don't
you have
know.
Abe. Doesn't he look like Karate Man there? Karate Man.
He just looks like he's very aligned with Donald Trump. Body language very strong. John Bolton, I do not trust, and I interviewed a guy in New Zealand who had worked on the International Committee for stopping the proliferation of chemical weapons, and they were about to make an announcement the day before. When George W. wanted to invade Iraq, they were about to say, hey, we've checked it out, there's no chemical weapons in Iraq. So Bolton went there and personally threatened the guy, had him removed, ruined his career and everything. That report never came out, and they went and destroyed Iraq. So he's got to go, in my book.
You don't like him? Okay.
Don't like him.
So, final on this page, this slide, we have a Dowdogram here.
What is that now?
Maureen Dowd.
Oh, Dowd.
A Dowdogram.
I thought you said
And this article, Maureen Dowd has been torturing the Clintons for a while, but this is not a pretty article at all.
Bill's belated Me Too moment.
Yeah.
So obviously this is continuing to lambaste Mr. Clinton for his idiotic comments on NBC, I presume?
Yeah, and I think you recently got
Oh, yes.
a copy of this book, a fine copy, which has the Schlickmeister signature there.
That it does. It was, I'll tell you, it's funny. Bill Clinton, even in denying any knowledge of Imran Awan, I guess what he's saying, he didn't have specific knowledge of the U.S. Capitol Police handing evidence over to Imran's defense attorney, something that Thomas Paine of True Pundit has said could only happen if someone at Gowan, Winograd, and Silva had intervened. Like maybe, I don't know, could they have been watching my live stream broadcasts, as Chris Gowan said he always does, and then maybe called the U.S. Capitol Police and somehow misled them into thinking that they were the ones who were supposed to receive this evidence so that this laptop could come to the defense attorney of Imran Awan and they could check out what evidence is there before
That just
the
sounds
prosecution.
very underhanded. Yeah.
I don't know that that's what happened, but experienced law enforcement people and experienced journalists like Thomas Paine have told me that's the only way he can think of that would have happened.
Well, actually, this could be that what happened flotilla of books coming out of the Clintons, right? How
Yeah.
was I supposed to know what actually happened?
Exactly, exactly. No information about what happened. I don't know anything about that. There's another good title for a Bill Clinton book.
That's right.
The short list of crimes he didn't know anything about.
But this is sort of, withering and overdue criticism. Now, I want to reassure the people who are now looking at this and say, oh my God, that's more numbers than I've ever thought about in my life.
Right.
Remember that the way we communicate with you numberophobic people, green is good, red is bad. Okay, it's that simple. Green is good, red is bad. So here we have the total G7 countries, right? The US first, Japan, Germany, the UK, France, Italy, and Canada, right? And what
Yeah.
I've done for you to give you a sense of the relative sizes in economic terms of these countries is to pick apart some key elements in gross domestic product
Right.
Gross domestic product is like a mulligatawny stew of a lot of different things. It came together as an economic concept in 1933. The predecessor was called gross national product. And I think it was bad then. The original creator of it was a man called Kuznets, who won a Nobel Prize in economics for.
There's just the whole calculation of GDP you're saying is bad?
Yeah, so Roosevelt needed a way to explain, to really sell the idea of big government, and he needed a scorecard. And so this guy Kuznets came up, I'm doing it in simplistic terms, but he came up with this way of measuring the total output of an economy year by year, and the idea being that when the output goes up, that's good. But in Kuznets' own thing, he points out that there's a lot of double counting. And he doesn't fully explain that the double counting is made, it allows for an argument of more and more and more government. So when you take it apart and you say, oh no, we're not going to do that, excuse my language, bullshit.
Yeah.
What we're going to do is we're going to take two relatively hard numbers. One relatively hard number is consumption.
Right.
That's what, as we'll show you in America shortly in a few minutes, most Americans earn and then spend exactly what they earn on consumption. There's no savings left over. You're going to be amazed when I show you
Isn't
this
that the
numbers.
marginal propensity to waste money or whatever?
Well, it's just, you live your life, you don't think about savings, you just say, any money that comes in this year, I'm going to spend this year.
Right.
That's actually the way 90% of Americans live. So that's 90% of households. But that consumption number is a number, some people waste money in consumption, but others are pretty careful. They don't say, well, yeah, I think, not the Clintons are not careful, but people, well, the scruffies are not too careful, and maybe liberals are not too careful, but most people are out there with kids and obligations.
Yeah.
They think long and hard about every penny of this consumption that is spent, right? The second thing would be investment in the private sector. When you're talking about real people who are compensated for making money, investing, this is in physical plants, in factories, and real estate, and other things. You fight over every dime when you're trying to negotiate a deal, as Donald Trump did, building $1 million into multi-billion dollars worth of assets.
Right.
You don't just say, oh yeah, it's okay, I don't mind losing money. You don't want to lose money, and the decisions that lead to the consumption and investment numbers, I add those together, are a subtotal of numbers about which people are fighting. Those are hard numbers. The government numbers, given the approach that voters have, where we just let the politicians off the hook, we let Jeff Immelt and Barack Obama spend $800 billion on a stimulus that didn't work, and then nobody says, well, I want that money back. We let Barack Obama double the national debt from 10 to 20 trillion, and nobody says, hey, you broke a lot of platinum credit cards here, bud.
Isn't that more money than every other president before him?
Right, and there's nothing about it. So you look at these two hard numbers, what people spend in their daily life, what professionals invest in hard assets, and then that's the internal market for serious decision making inside the United States, right? And then you look at exports. Those are sales of goods and services to foreign customers, right? And then compare the two. The exports are only 14.54% of the internal activity inside this country. In other words, Americans are principally inward focused. A lot of the tough economic decisions that we make are fulfilled in an internal market that is gigantic compared to any other country, right?
Yep.
So I said before, all nations are not created equal. We are in a place today. Are we vulnerable? Could things go wrong in the United States? Of course. But when you just look, these are figures from 2016, created by a UN organization called UNCTAD, which has these figures from 1970 going right the way through to 2016. There's the link at the bottom. You can check all this stuff for yourselves. But the first thing to look at here is that we're an internal country. In other words, we don't need access to foreign markets in the same way that Germany does. Now look at Germany.
Whoa.
In contrast to ourselves, they have an internal consumption market, 1.9 trillion. They have an investment which is 20% of ours, a total action of 2.5 trillion, but they sell 1.6 trillion in exports. So they're all in for cultivating globalism. They're all in for cultivating foreign clients.
That's all cars and coffee machines.
Well, and machinery and other things. But the point here is they're very much wedded to an EU, where they can be the most important multilateral agent in there, and to the UN and all these. And of course, Merkel's leaning over, looking at Trump, because she realizes that, you know, once the people around the world look at this and say, all right, Canada, okay, you want to be part of this globalism? Okay, you're 1.2 trillion. Your internal market is 892
Pretty
billion.
small.
Look at ours.
12.
You want to be cut off from our market? Okay, we don't really need necessarily. Our companies
maple
aren't
syrup or whatever they got?
Well, we've actually shifted car production up there, but a fair amount of passenger car production. But the point is, we're not all equal when it comes to economics. Doesn't mean that we're better necessarily for being bigger, but we are a lot bigger. And if you're a consequential business person in Japan, in Germany, any of these other countries, you need to sell in the US market to be a significant player. You're never going to achieve the scale that you need to achieve to compete with an American company if you say, you know what, I'm going to ignore the largest market in the world. And so you look at this and you say, like, Germany, we understand why they're, you know, trying to rattle the cages of other people, but look at tiny Japan. It's not so tiny. It's the second biggest economy in terms of consumption among the G7. And look at the export ratio. Where in '89 they were heavily dependent on exports, now they're not. They too have a large internal market. And so, you know, US and Japan have close relationships right now, very close. Japan and China have historical major league tensions.
Yep.
Japan and Korea, same deal. But we're very close. Germany, I think, is the odd person out. The UK, you know, currently it has, I mean, Soros called Clinton a school marm. I think Trump may have referred to Theresa May as a school marm, but she comes across as a school marm, and I think she's got problems, internal political problems. France, Macron was, you know, we should do Macron as Marcel Marceau. Would be pretty funny in shorts.
Yeah.
But I mean, he may think that he's you know, going to do well cultivating his ties in Germany, but he's making some big time mistakes. Italy is, as you know, I think tilting back towards Trump, openly supporting Trump. Canada, I think Trudeau is a good chance that he gets turfed out.
What do you mean turfed out?
There'll be an election called and he'll be gone.
Huh.
Because I think his economy, if he wants to take on the United States, he's going to learn a very bitter lesson quickly.
Isn't he very popular in Canada?
He's popular if the economy's doing well, but if energy prices plummet and tariffs start happening and he doesn't produce results and companies start choosing the U.S. over Canada, which could well happen. So you look at this and then you say, look, our internal market and our investment thing, 16 trillion. Everybody else, the other 6 countries in the G7 are 13 trillion. Okay? Just dealing with the U.S. If I'm sitting there in China, and saying, you know, look, I got limited resources, I've got a management team that's expensive, what do I need to do? I need to focus on targeting the U.S. market. And somebody says, well, we also should have somebody going after Japan and Germany and the UK and France and Italy and Canada. These are the biggest markets in the world, some of them. But nonetheless, you know, why have the superstructure you need, the administrative burden,
for all of them,
to fly all
as big
just
as
focus
one.
on the U.S., right? And why should we waste our time as the U.S.? You know, if Germany really wants to go once again, I mean, they did it in 1916, World War I, they were a problem. In World War II, they certainly were a problem. Are they going to create problems again for the United States? I don't think so. And I say this, my ancestor, or first Ortel ancestor, emigrated from Prussia in 1853, so you can't say I'm against anti-German or whatever.
Oh, but that would be a great opportunity for another ancient Ortel cartoon.
It's actually, and I'm sure that Bill Clinton's team probably wishes this actually happened, but the funny part about this is that we found out the records of the ship that this ancestor came over on, nearly didn't make it. Crashed.
Whoa.
On some submerged stuff right as it got towards land, not in Manhattan, but further north, I think off Connecticut or something like that. There are records of it.
Wow.
And he, I'm lucky to be alive. Literally lucky. We're all lucky to be alive.
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
But anyway, so then we look, let's think about these other nations. So everyone talks about China. And yes, they have 1 billion more people than we do. And
That's
so
crazy.
does India have 1 billion more people than we do, right? We're at 325.
Yeah.
So you're sitting there, they would have the ability, if they were crazy, to say, all right, look, we'll get our population down to America's present population by sending 1 billion people to attack. So it's not clear to me that we really want to encourage countries that have 1 billion more people than we have to arm themselves militarily and get, that's not something I see as being a genius move.
No.
On behalf of the current population and future generations.
You mean by letting them steal 614
I don't think
terabytes of military info?
There should be some gigabytes, right?
Oh, gigabytes, sorry.
That's right.
I keep getting that confused.
That's right. So, but when we look at this, you notice here the consumption numbers are typically much bigger than the investment numbers in all these countries, save for China. Look at this. China's total consumption, 4.9 trillion. Their investment's 5.1 trillion. And my thesis, which I've exposed to Gordon Chang, who's a great follower of China and others, is that China has a massive bubble. I do not believe that 5.1 trillion was spent sensibly in 2016 on investments. We spent a far bigger economy, only 3.7 trillion. And I don't believe that business people, underinvest for the hell of it. No, they look at it, is this a sensible investment or not? The costs of putting up these factories and investing have actually dwindled. You can see that in the figures. And in the United States, our capacity utilization, if you're close to capacity, that's when you invest. We're nowhere close to capacity, and we're investing 3.7 trillion. How in the hell can China justify the 5.1 trillion? You take that 5.1 trillion out and you say maybe it should only have been 1.5, then suddenly China is not that big an economy, actually. In consumption terms, I'm going to show you in a second, the consumption it's a big number, 4.9 trillion, but there's 1 billion people there.
Yeah,
so per capita, I'm going to show that in a second.
Less than half of ours. So, Charles, just because it's difficult for me to understand a lot of what you're talking about here, so is China investing this 5.1 trillion to make themselves be propped up and seem bigger?
Could be. I mean, it's called
like building all these fake cities that nobody lives in.
Exactly. And they could also mask corruption. It could mask. I mean, the Clinton Foundation. You say you spent 165 million on the thing, but you actually only spent 30, and you steal the other. You send the cash to New York. I mean, so we don't know. None of these. There is no internationally capable set of competent economists and accountants who could look at all these numbers and say the U.S. is doing its work correctly, China isn't, Canada, we don't have such a group. So you have to take all these numbers at face value. I will show you in a second. I think that all these numbers are overstated. We have another source for U.S. data which comes in at much less than 12.4 trillion for consumption. But you look at this, and it's just dramatic how the United States is not really today overly dependent on exports, whereas Germany is. And actually, when you look at the small countries, the remainder, look at their total ratio, it's 47%. Exports are 47% of their total internal activity. And what that means is the remainder includes, the oil exporting countries who have tiny local consumption and gigantic exports.
Right. It's like Saudi Arabia, I would imagine.
And in a lot of the developing world, you're talking about extractive industries, you're talking about mining, and selling that on the international market. But the U.S., no, we're not like that. We're a very large internal market with too much debt on it. And, politicians like the Clintons and the Obamas and the Bushes, determined to sell bitterness and division so that they can keep each wing of the uniparty in power instead of fessing up to the fact that actually people in the United States are really well off. Even poor people in the United States are well off compared to their international counterparts, as I will now show you. So if we go to the next slide. Okay. Now we're bearing in focused on consumption, okay? And we're looking at, this is the consumption of the top 10% versus the consumption of the bottom 90%. So here, consumption is, again, it's what you spend on shelter, rent or mortgage. It's what you spend on
Everything,
clothing and
basically,
food. Just what you spend to live, travel, reading, entertainment, whatever. We spend, the top 10% in this country spends on average $114,000 per year, per person, okay? According
Wow.
to this UNCTAD data, adjusted by information and estimates from the CIA World Factbook.
That seems like more money than most people make.
I'll show you in a second. This is the top 10%, okay?
Right.
It is more money. But on the world level, the top 10% in the world spend only $17,640. This is the top tier across the world.
Right.
That's what they spend. And in the smaller countries, what I'm calling the remainder, $12,041, okay? So that means we in the United States, at the top end, we spend 9.5 times as much per person
Wow.
in our top 10. Then the remainder, this is a lot of people, by the way. This is 3.7 billion people in the remainder, okay? And then the bottom, so our rich folk spend 9 times as much, and our poor bottom 90% spend 10.62 times
Wow.
what the remainder does, okay? And you look at these amounts, the bottom 90% spends $29,574 per year. This is the bottom 90% of Americans.
Where's that? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, 29,574, okay? Our bottom is significantly better off than everybody else. And look at the
like
difference.
more than 10 times.
Yeah, and and in the case of China and India, it's curious. I mean, the bottom 90% of Chinese and Indians are very, very poor.
Wow, yeah.
Okay, so
That's per year, 779.
yeah, in India.
On everything.
On everything. Yeah. But
So what are they even eating?
Well, they have a different diet.
Wow.
And so the point, again, I'm not casting value judgments. There are plenty of people who have no money who make enormous contributions to society. I'm not trying to make value judgments about it's good to be rich and it's bad to be poor. I'm just trying to illustrate that the loony land sold to us by these unregulated globalism advocates, that let's just take 200 countries, make them all equal, create these gigantic bureaucracies, manage the world to focus on all the many permutations of issues and all these regions and this and that. That is not a very sensible approach. A far more sensible approach in the age of disruption is to take apart all of these multinational organizations that are wasting money, taking time, promulgating regulations, and focus on addressing core problems in the major economies and in the most deserving nations around the world. We do not need to have regional organizations and, this subset of the world and that subset of the world. No, we need to get our houses in order in these big economies. We need to make sure that when we're providing aid, which we do a lot of, to these poorer countries, that aid money is not stolen and diverted back into the donor companies.
To the top 10.
Right. By institutions, in quotes, like the Clinton Foundation and the Soros Foundation.
Well, and that's what I'm thinking about. Like, how terrible is it that there's people who have like $780 a year? And I mean, I don't know that we've spoken too much about the Clintons doing anything in India, but
They have.
I feel like probably how much are the poorest people in Haiti spending? That might be close
300.
to that. Wow.
Yeah, and in Africa, and this number down here, remainder, includes rich countries like Switzerland and Holland and Sweden and whatever. So you further divide this, the remainder, you get down. There are many countries where people spend $200 per capita per year.
Wow.
All right, so this is now international data. I would argue this just like the Roosevelt GNP and that became GDP was designed to make things look better than they really are. I think this UN data makes it seem as if all the countries in the world, including the US, are better off than they actually are. Mm-hmm. But there's a bias, I think, in favor of inflating the statistics that one could argue might inflate all the statistics. Maybe not equally, but the bias is towards inflation, making it look better.
What's the purpose in doing that?
To say the UN is making progress.
Ah.
We're looking at how great a job we're doing. Everyone's better off.
Right.
So if we then go to the next page, Now this, again, I know this is a lot of numbers, and I'm not trying to overwhelm people, but and I accept that maybe some of this will be overwhelming, but there are very key things to be gleaned from this information. Okay, this is taken from the Consumer Expenditure Survey, which is a great piece of evidence that we've talked about in the past, where they cut the information about all the households in the United States of America different ways, and they call them consumer units, same as a household basically. And they show you how much in granular detail. I put some big numbers together as opposed to the minutia, but this Consumer Expenditure Survey literally tells you how much a family spends on a carton on eggs per year, how much they spend on cereal, on
How
men's
could they
clothing,
possibly
women's
get that right?
Well, they say it's pretty good. You know,
Okay.
it's a big sample. You're talking about almost 130 million units, and they've been doing this for a long time, and people say it's pretty good. But it does tell the story the way I understand it to be, and it makes sense to me a lot.
Okay.
So when we think about the top 10% by terms of income of households, they're not the same as the bottom 90%. There's one extremely important difference. In the top 10% households, these are people that have 2.1 people in them making money. Whereas in the bottom 90% on average, it's only 1.168. Okay? So what does this tell you if you're trying to improve your lot? You're over here and you want to get here. It tells you
Marry somebody with a job.
Well, no, you want to not necessarily marry, partner, cohabitate with somebody. And I'm not, going down a track of saying, traditional marriage or this marriage. Just find somebody to live with. It's better if you love the person, but you can't do that. Just find somebody to live with, and you will derive immense economies of scale.
Huh.
Two people can live in a one-bedroom apartment.
Yeah, that's true.
Right, and you start thinking about it. So what separates the bottom 90% from the top 10% is a simple decision to, I say down here, partnering, right? But the most important thing in this, look at the difference in wages per earning person. It's roughly 100,000 each, right? And here it's 35,000. So what does that tell you? That tells you that you better think about, if you've got children, you're trying to point them in the direction of being successful. You say, look, there are jobs, a range of skills, engineering, science, medicine, legal profession. There are a range of skills that you can get where the pay scale is better. And it can make sense to position a child who likes to study and is interested in these high-paying jobs from a very early period to start gravitating in that direction, right? So this information that's out there, this is information estimates for the entire American society in 2016, done by, at this time it was controlled, are you still controlled by Obama elements? So you can't say this is Trump. You could try saying it's Trump making the data look bad, but I don't think that's the case. This came out of the 8th year of the Obama administration. So there people were deeply stuck in, and it shows this real divide between people who partner together, and each of them makes $99,000, so they're up at $200,000 plus in wages, versus people who can't do that. They have only really one person earning the money, maybe a teenage child or something, and you're trapped. You need to get from here to here, and the key to that's education. Okay, and the key to that is taking education seriously. That's something that Donald Trump and his people can do, reforming America's education system to give those who are interested. Some people just say, look, school is not for me. You're going to have, you lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. So those people, they're going to have a very hard life unless they're incredibly gifted naturally at something. But the sensible thing tells you education and partner. Then you look at the information about shares. People in the Clinton envy wing, the Obama envy wing, are fond of saying, and Bernie Sanders, the millionaires and billionaires. The millionaires and billionaires in this country are a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of the population. This is the information for the top 10%, including the millionaires and billionaires. Okay, and the average income,
Right.
For
Not
wages,
a billion, right.
For this is all the top 10% with Warren Buffett in there and Bill Gates and the hedge fund tycoons is only $208,000. You strip the top people out, right? And it gets even thinner than I'm showing you.
Right.
But I've got the billionaires in there with you. You see that the average wage is $209,000. The average other income's $60,000. $269,000 pre-tax. They pay income taxes of $64,000, so they're netting $205,000, right, after taxes. And here's the important difference, the second further important difference. They get this after tax, and they spend less than they earn. How complicated is that? You know, figure out what you're making on an after-tax basis, and try to cut your spending down so that you have something left over. This group does that.
I think the difficulty that comes in is when the amount that you're earning there's a shortfall between what you actually need, and people get into credit.
Again, now look, I did not manufacture these numbers. I'm amazed that they came in where they did. Look at the difference in the bottom 90%. They get $48,477 per year, and they spend $48,476. So they save $1 a year.
Come on, that sounds crazy.
It's right.
Is that like The Price is Right?
It's $1.
I'll wager $1.
Yeah, every day they come home and they say, like, where should I put the dollar this year?
Yeah,
GE,
so it's like
or short,
one additional Big Mac, and there goes the savings.
That's right. Well, I mean, this is 90% of the households, right? So there's your fundamental problem. Now look at the amount that they're spending. They're spending $19,924 per person. Okay, we go back to the previous slide and you look at that's a lot of money actually on an international basis.
19,000?
Yeah. Look at India, look at China, look, Russia, look at Mexico. It's not like it's impossible to cut your spending if you're spending $19,000 per person per year. I mean, you could find places to cut spending. And instead of doing that, part of the problem here is that people like Nancy Pelosi and people they love to see the poorest among us get into debt, payday loans, buying houses they can't afford. They love seducing people into that. And there's whole industries actually that spring up preying on people who make bad credit decisions. Right. In contrast, the studies, India has gone down a track of making credit and bank accounts available to the poor. You get these traps where you don't have a bank account, therefore you can't get credit.
Check cashing businesses,
and you start paying 10% out of your check to a check cashing service.
Right. Well, I've always noticed, Charles, when as I traveled around doing films and things around the country, the check cashing, payday loan, and bail bond
they're
places,
all the
same neighborhoods.
Right next to your hotel.
Right. You see that, and you're like, oh. It usually is next to the hotel.
So here's one thing, a further takeaway. We've put the positives in green. The negatives are, you look at this and you say, all right, across the entire American economy, a large economy, the top 10% per year of working, that's like, let's call that 48 weeks a year, assuming you get 4 weeks off.
Who does that?
I'm just saying, some people...
4 weeks off? It's like, I haven't had 4 weeks off in the past 10 years.
Right. But I'm saying, I'm saying in a generous way in the private sector that you're a salary person and you get 4 weeks off. You're nonetheless spending 48 weeks of your life out of 52, and all you're getting is $99,335. That's the top end. Whereas Hillary Clinton gets on a private jet and goes out to some venue in California and gets $225,000 for a 40-minute speech
nonsense,
concerning what happened or didn't happen or likely never will happen now. And the level, to me, if we're looking for overpaid people, and speaking to somebody who might love one day to get paid to do a speech, I think it is indefensible that these politicians, whether it's Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Obama, are getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars, for a speech, a 40-minute speech, plus private jet travel and expenses and hangers-on being paid for this and that. Not to mention Dopey James Comey's book advance. And speaking as somebody who'd like to write a book, I'd love to get a big advance. But
how much did they give Dopey James Comey?
Over $1 million.
Over $1 million. Slippery James Comey, as Trump has called him now.
Is it Slippery James Comey? Okay, good. The lion liar, lion leaking liar.
Yeah.
But triple L. But I think then on the subject of these book advances, for Clinton to net what he netted, 12 million or something like that.
From that?
Not that, but from his My Life, that book. his first book, Hillary's various books.
About that.
You know, this puts, for me, it frames, you know, an issue here. To what is really going on? When you go in and you say, like, you want to bribe a politician, you say, we can't call it a bribe. What we're going to do is we're going to give you a book advance.
Yes.
But that sounds a lot like a bribe. I'm not going to write it. Justin Cooper's going to write it. You know, well, we'll pay him $200,000. So why do I get 12 million, 15 million, or in the case of the Obamas, 60 million for a bunch of books that may be written by other people? This is a whole area that, you know, it's part of the swamp.
I'm surprised that Andrew McCabe hasn't written a book yet. When's that coming? I guess he just did the GoFundMe.
He said, I'm not going to write a book. I'll just send me some money.
Exactly. Why do anything?
So this is, to me, a very illuminating chart, and it does show that in our country, and probably in other countries, there is a big divide. It's not like money is evenly spread around our great economy. It's like there's a top group, and these are probably Republicans and Democrats alike.
Book authors.
No, I'm forgetting the cronies, but in this top 10%,
Yeah.
I'm talking about 17% of all the people making money, right? Now there's this idea that people don't pay their fair share of taxes. This top group, 17% of the earners pay 61% of the income taxes. Huh. Now, this is an important point I'd like to make to Bernie Sanders. I know you're not going to watch this, and the people who might follow Bernie Sanders. One of the great inequities in our country is the degree to which idiots in both parties have said, you know what we'll do is we'll allow these states and localities to have gigantic taxes, sales taxes and other taxes, which go into the cost of buying these goods and services. One of the reasons that people are spending $48,476 per capita and having only $1 left over is that the many states and locations and other entities inside our country put taxes that push up the cost of these consumer goods onto the hands of the poorest among us. So when you think about your tax burden, it's not simply the income tax that you're paying. You're paying taxes literally almost every time you breathe. You pay taxes after you die.
Yeah,
right. I mean,
state
it's like
tax.
Right. So I mean, the idea that
that's crazy.
But when we look at this whole thing, people on the right and the left should be saying, you know, from 1998 to 1999, certain things, technological developments, have brought the costs of many industries way, way down. Why is it that the cost of government only goes up? You know, why is it that so many different people are free to, let's have this tax and that tax, the sales tax, 9% almost in New York, the sales tax.
Yeah.
Now, there aren't many companies in the world that actually regularly make an after-tax profit margin of 9%.
Right.
Why are we allowing, you know, the city and state of New York to charge businesses such high sales taxes? For what?
They got to waste it and steal it.
Yeah, and have a lot of people on the payroll and retirees on the payroll who will then all vote that political party the Democrats in here in New York. I mean, this is a very illustrating, for me, a very illustrative chart. I again apologize for the large number of numbers.
I think you've clarified it quite well.
And if you want more information, just go to this link and you'll see the actual source material. So if we then go to the next, and I think final, yeah. We don't yet know what's actually going to happen with the Singapore Sling Summit. You know,
have you been to Singapore, Charles?
Many times.
Don't eat a sandwich on the subway. It's a $10,000 fine.
Or don't chew gum, they'll whip you.
I saw a woman eating a sandwich on the subway in Singapore. I thought, you're crazy. This better be a good sandwich.
Was it Hillary?
I don't know who it was. It was just a random woman. But I mean, just the very outside possibility that you might get a why would you do that?
Yes. Singapore, to me, I actually like Malaysia more than Singapore, but
rains a lot in Singapore.
I've never rained when I was there.
It was like a monsoon.
Was it really?
I went there for a film festival. The first film I ever worked on got into that festival.
Really?
Well, it was a 3D festival they were trying to start that really only had 1 year, but we were nominated against Avatar for best 3D. Well, we lost. I mean, it was like two 3D films out that year. So
Yeah.
it's us and Avatar.
Hint, Democrats, that's 2018, 2020, and you're not going to be Avatar in the election. Just a hint, okay? So I think the biggest takeaway from me on the Singapore summit is not necessarily what's going to happen in Korea, which could well, go sideways. I don't think it will, but it could go sideways. The biggest thing is the reaction that Iran and Venezuela, to a lesser extent Russia and others, are going to have watching this, right? Look at what Trump called the leader of North Korea, and now Trump has gotten, he's got a lot of other things he could do than get on a plane and fly 20 hours to Singapore.
What did he call him? Rocket Man?
Called him Rocket Man, etc. And supposedly Iran is watching what's going on. They better watch what's going on, because the sanctions in Iran on Iran are really beginning to bite, and Iran has long been on the wrong end of the stick with the United States. Their people have been miserable for 40 years almost, economically anyway, and Iran has the people of Iran have tremendous potential once Iran rejects this fanatical, radical version of Islam that they promote and the mayhem they're promoting around the world and across the Middle East. So Iran's got to be watching this very carefully for many reasons, because Iran and North Korea have been in the cahoots. To the extent we now strike a deal with North Korea and they fully explain what they were doing, that may implicate Iran.
Oh, what do you mean, like North Korea sharing nuclear stuff with Iran?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So it's just like, when people didn't appreciate how the genius, the Council on Foreign Relations types and others on Morning Joe who derided Donald Trump and his team for making their first foreign state visit, one in Saudi Arabia and Israel, and what was the third place? Egypt, was it? I forget the third place. But anyway, it was Saudi Arabia,
Did he go to
Israel,
England?
and the Vatican. People derided Trump for doing that. It was actually a very smart move. And afterwards, certain people like Waleed, the dishonorable, despicable Waleed, and others who inhabited the Riyadh Ritz-Carlton or whatever, sleeping in an unusual position.
Hanging from the feet, you mean?
Saudi Arabia was able to find out information under Prince Mohammed bin Salman and others that we will never find out in the same way. And similarly, if we are able to make progress here with North Korea, we're going to find out a lot of information about crooked Iran's dealings with elements of North Korea that will further exacerbate tensions between Donald Trump and Iran. And one hopes that the sanctions, the new attitude towards Iran, may embolden the Iranian diaspora, which is very wealthy and would like to return home to a free Iran, and elements inside Iran who will finally say, we see Donald Trump, landing on Rocket Man, now doing a deal where North Korea is going to thrive if the deal happens.
Right.
We want that deal. We don't want to be in the pariah land.
Yeah, and I heard something that Venezuela is watching this very closely, because I think most people would figure, hey, if North Korea can come in from the cold, certainly anybody can. You brought up Al-Walid bin Talal, who's a definite opponent of Trump. Trump has been aligned with the Crown Prince, who there was an attack at the palace, and there's been questions about his health since then. But this Arab News, I'm not familiar with this site, but they're saying that MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, will visit Russia next week. So
good.
I presume he must be alive if they're doing that. It's hard to have a dead person visit, so he must be well.
Yeah, Saudi Arabia is no Cuba.
Right.
Is Fidel Castro, has he ever been buried, or is he still alive?
I think he's alive and well, running Canada.
So we have, this is a funny tweet from Donald Trump. He does, and I love the people that take away his Twitter. He shouldn't tweet.
No, I think it's been very important that he has it.
Well, look at this. I was struck by this on a number of levels. Just met the new Prime Minister of Italy, Giuseppe Conte, IT, a really great guy. He will do a great job. The people of Italy got it right. So I was moved to then say, oh, who is this Giuseppe Conti? And if you hit the, I don't know if it'll work, if you hit the link.
This?
Yeah, look, he only has 73,000 followers.
You're
On
almost
Twitter.
more popular than him.
No, but I mean, kind of interesting.
Why do you think
He's
that's
only
interesting?
following 6 people.
Doesn't
Mr.
seem to be that
You might
active
want to
on
follow
Twitter.
who's he following? And I hope it's not
It's you, me, and Donald Trump.
the Canadian Prime Minister.
Shinzo Abe. It looks like
Theresa
he just
May.
started this Twitter account.
May to, okay, so he's just in.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He just started. That's pretty good for starting in May. But he should follow probably you.
I'm following him.
Yeah. As is Zach, Bilyana, Mr. Scavino. That's good.
So if we go back into the slides.
Yes.
Now, this is really something. In South Africa,
Yes.
if we hit that, I hate to give prominence to the New York Times, but I mean, there's a really dangerous set of conditions. This is the case in India, it's the case in South Africa, it's the case in many African countries, many poorer countries. They have tax rules, but the people in the tax department say, all right, Mr. Goodman, you know, you've got a South African tax bill of R1,000,000. You can settle that bill, I'll give you a receipt saying you paid it if you give me 200,000 rand in my Swiss bank account. Now that's
Who's getting that? The person
the tax
doing the
collector.
audit?
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Good way for the country to go out of business.
But that's what's happening. That is what happens in many of these countries.
It's always surprising to me. It seems wherever I go in the world, and I haven't been to South Africa, but here's a picture of it. Stuff like, you know, Pete Marwick and all this is everywhere. Like, what does this company need an office in South Africa for?
No, they have the big accounting firms have offices in virtually every country. They're globalists.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Like in New Zealand, they're just, I'm not remembering exactly which companies I'm thinking about.
Price Waterhouse probably there.
Yeah, but just all these companies are in every single country, and it's like,
Yeah, and Price Waterhouse is, you know, they quote audited the Clinton Foundation for a number of years. Remember, Price Waterhouse are the people who distinguished themselves at the Academy Awards. Remember that?
well, not only that, it's like you get like Arthur Anderson shreds a bunch of Enron documents, and they say, oh, that's out of business. Well, where did all those guys go work? Here.
Exactly. Well, you remember what happened with Price Waterhouse, though, right? You got,
Yeah, they gave the wrong winner for the Academy Awards.
You got one job, right? You got this briefcase.
And there's like 2 choices or whatever.
Right, and you get, you know, I want to use that firm.
Right. Very stupid for sure.
So now, it's high time, and people say you expect corruption in South Africa. It is now, we're a month away or so, month and a half, for the IRS having, in theory, been investigating the Clinton Foundation after courageous...
Oh, this is the new guy.
No, that's the old guy.
Oh.
This is an old story. This is from 2016. This guy Koskinen, who really was his people were, you know, disrespectful and extreme to Marsha Blackburn and the congressman, who said, "Hey, what's going on with this Clinton Foundation?" So he confirms, Koskinen does, the IRS, July 27, 2016, that they are indeed investigating the Clinton Foundation. Now, what happened right around this same time, 4 days later?
I don't know.
That's when the FBI officially opened an investigation into the Trump campaign.
Got it.
Right.
The Trump campaign.
Right? 4 days after this. Well, how do you think that would have worked? Looks like they're getting close on Clinton. We better have a, quote, insurance policy. We better have something that goes after Trump. You know? And so we stand down the IRS investigation and we rev up the Trump investigation. That, I think, did happen.
Wow.
And if it doesn't come out in the Horowitz report, doesn't examine this, then we know the Horowitz report is not as good as it should be.
Well, it's interesting, Charles, because you frequently talk about the massive expenditure, the total cost of government here in the U.S. I forget, 6 trillion?
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's such a big number. It's crazy. And when you think that they're wasting it by, like, texting their girlfriends and not properly investigating actual crimes, but investigating their political enemies or whatever. That sounds like a really super good way to waste a ton of money. And also with the Horowitz report, there's been so many, different people saying Horowitz is great, Horowitz is swamp, whatever. I just did an episode the other day with Larry Klayman in which he is talking about the predictably weak Horowitz report, and he thinks it's going to go nowhere. Of course, we heard Harmon Wilfred share actual, email correspondence with Horowitz where he was asking Mr. Horowitz to investigate the fact that he was wrongly imprisoned, no charges whatsoever, and Horowitz wrote back and said there's nothing to investigate. So I must admit, I'm leaning towards the Horowitz's swamp part of the argument. We'll see what happens.
I mean, we'll see. I think to have, if you told me the report was a page, 2 pages, I'd say definitely swamp.
The IG pamphlet?
Yeah, but 400 pages, 500 pages, we'll be able to tell. I mean, you and I will be able to tell whether, what this person missed, right? And it could be that other elements of the U.S. and foreign governments, are aware of the wider picture here. And so, I don't think Horowitz will get away with a complete whitewash of something that is an obvious set of crimes, obstruction of justice, by many, many people, and in the case of the Clinton Foundation, going back over 20 years.
Yeah.
Right now, he may not touch on the Clinton Foundation directly in this second report of 4. There's supposed to be this one and then two more after it.
Wow.
So we'll see what he talks about. We'll have a chance to study it. Comes out on Thursday.
Yeah.
And
Donald
we'll be
Trump's
talking
birthday.
Whose?
Donald Trump?
Yeah.
You familiar with him?
Who? Who dat? Anyway, we go back into the slides.
I didn't realize there was going to be 4 Horowitz.
That's what I believe is the case.
It's a lot of reporting.
So the second of the 2 here, this Wolf indictment
Oh, yeah.
is getting people concerned
Which people?
in Washington, D.C.
The corrupt people.
Yeah, this came out several days ago. This is the conservative treehouse, the Sundance person who's fantastic. Keep up
One of
the
your
great work,
favorites.
whoever you are, Sundance. But the essence of this story, and you can read it at your leisure, is that a lot of people have got to be nervous here. I mean, we have one indictment. It was a sealed indictment. It was unsealed, I think, on the 7th of June. And clearly a lot of people were doing a lot of work here. Clearly the Trump team has been upset about leaking. They're not the only team. Obama and his people went viciously after James Rosen and others. I am very much against the idea of the state, the government, going after you, going after me, going after journalists as a matter of course.
Right.
On the other hand, if we're going to go through a process of truly classifying information, not classifying everything so you can have excessive classification, real classified stuff needs to be protected, and there need to be serious penalties on the leaker of classified information, assuming it is fairly classified. Journalists should know better. And certainly the notion that a news...
journalists should know better. I mean, journalists are the ones who should be on the side of trying to get the information. It's the guy that leaked it who's supposed to be not talking about it that should know better.
Well, I'm saying, I don't think you should be sending Mata Hari in to sleep with...
That's right.
James.
See, that's what that reeks of to me. Like, this doesn't look like an obvious romantic connection.
You're saying because he doesn't wear glasses?
This guy... He kind of looks like crap to me. I don't know.
Well, he looks kind of like nasty, actually.
Yes, he just looks terrible, and this is like a young, pretty woman who even when I saw her speak on television, I just felt like she's operating in some way. She's like, I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, temperatures are rising in Washington, D.C., and we don't need to speculate about what's going to be in the report. We'll see it hopefully on Thursday.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we've talked about this. I love the pictures that Breitbart puts in here. But here's this issue, we talked about it before, that there was a quirk in the law that if you raise money for the Democratic Party, you're allowed to raise more per donor than if you do it for just a candidate. And the allegation basically is that, as usual, the Clintons rigged that process and raised $84 million illegally. This lawsuit, this is 40 different Democratic parties at state level, fed $84 million to Hillary Clinton's losing campaign in 2016. And, the suit has got legs. It is moving along. We'll see what sort of judges end up adjudicating the suit.
The suit has legs.
And the pantsuit had legs.
But also, this is her, pre-Captain Pike days. She's able to stand up under her own power.
And who is this person?
I don't know, but for a minute he looked like Vince Foster.
It also looked like Sean Hannity.
And Hannity, yeah.
Extra weight. But I doubt it's Sean Hannity.
Neither of them. It's just some generic...
Some dude?
Yeah, generic dude, I would think.
So if we go back in, and we're almost done. This is another Judicial Watch effort here. Make it a little smaller so I can see.
That's...
Oh yeah, this is talked about in the Washington Times.
But that's full size. I can't make it smaller.
Oh, okay, yeah. So this is Judicial Watch is still trying to get a full accounting for all the emails that were on the Wiener Aberdeen laptop. And I think what they did when they did their search after they belatedly found the email, the laptop. I think they were able to clear it so quickly by saying, "I'll tell you what. Why don't you search for 'I admit to corruption' and see how many hits you get."
Nothing there.
Nothing there.
I don't know how that happened.
When you print out every single email and you put 1,000 people on it and you say, let's examine each email chain and let's see whether there are addresses on it that we didn't know about and subject matter we didn't know about. But if you restrict the search terms, you can game the result, which is, I think, what they did.
Not only that, Charles, but Huma and Anthony have this laptop at home with all this government stuff on it. Hillary has her private server. This is just such blatant, misuse of classified information. Just leave it around the house, texting people from it or whatever.
It's nuts.
Yeah.
Why don't they just walk over to the Russian embassy and say, listen, we don't like this global warming thing, having your spies fly all over the place. Just
take the info.
Come by.
Honestly, I'm less worried about Russia than some of the other countries that might have gotten their hands on it. Despite the Cold War rivalry between the United States and Russia, I think that in a general sense, the people and even the government of Russia is more closely aligned with the United States in 2018 in terms of their agenda and goals than certain Middle Eastern and African nations that...
Not to mention Canada.
Exactly.
But
the Communist Republic of Canada.
Yeah, so if you look here in this second to last one here, you've done a lot of excellent reporting on Imran Awan. You're the one who identified the, what was it exactly?
Well, the shed at 4809 Sprayer Street, which had a high-speed internet account running into it that Chris Gowan seems to think was held by the previous owner, who hadn't lived there for 2 years, who is known. The woman and man who owned that house, the husband died, and Laurel Everly's mother knows them, coincidentally, from church. And I spoke to Laurel Everly about some of Chris Gowan's rather ridiculous statements about his assertion that, just having an internet account in the house is not a crime. Now, I'm not saying that it is a crime. I'm saying it's highly suspicious because I've never owned a house that I've rented to anyone. I presume perhaps you have? Okay, so offering internet as part of a rental is plausible. However, that's not what was happening at 4809 Sprayer Street. Laurel Everly was totally unaware of this internet connection until we saw a photograph of what was very obviously a internet cable modem router, and then called Cox Cable and confirmed that there was an account there from 2015 to 2017. Now, this was an elderly woman who had sold the house because after the death of her husband, she had very limited financial resources. I do not think it's a very realistic or plausible scenario that someone would completely forget about a high-speed internet account. I know I pay like, $80 a month for high-speed internet, so you're gonna pay that every month for 2 years and not notice? And even if someone else did hold it, what happened? Imran freaked out when the basement flooded and there was still something locked in the shed that this internet connection was directly adjacent to that Laurel could never access. Gowan went on to say that the contents of the shed were the property of the previous owner, which is totally not true. Imran had access to that shed, was in and out of it several times that Laurel observed, told me about that. So,
well, that whole thing to me just reeks to high heaven. And I think Donald Trump's tweet from Canada or elsewhere saying, plea deal, not so fast. I think it is entirely more than proper for Congress and the FBI and the American public to understand how so many Democratic Congresspeople could reach a decision to entrust, secrets and business of the United States involving their constituents, involving Republicans and Democrats alike. Who made the decision to hire these Awans? And it's not a case of Islamophobia. It's a case of we are now today, under Donald Trump, I think we properly made the decision that Pakistan is not a natural friend.
No.
And you could have made that decision a long time ago, but of course, when Barack Obama was in college, one of his closest friends was from a fancy guy from Pakistan. So this whole issue of, how were secrets handled? How many secrets may have slipped through the net? How many Congress people were involved in this? Were there kickbacks involved? Why is Debbie Wasserman Schultz so interested in stopping these inquiries?
Yeah.
What has happened to, I read a story last week, I thought that some of this information may have gone missing, was supposed to be in custody, police custody or somewhere, it's gone missing.
Well, no, they handed it right to Chris Gowan. I mean, when I started interfacing with Laurel Everly, she presented us with a lot of evidence. One of the things that she said was that Imran would come to the house 2 or 3 times a week, which seems like a lot for a landlord to come and visit, particularly when he's employed full-time in the IT department at Congress, making 2.5 times the average salary of anybody over there. So he's there 2 or 3 times a week, and her laptop went missing for 3 or 4 days at some point, and she lived in the house only with her daughter. Her daughter didn't take it or use it, and then the laptop just magically showed up a few days later sitting on her bed.
Kind of like the Rose billing records, huh?
Right, and Imran has keys to the house. He's frequently in there, so she said she feels he might have hacked the laptop. There was something else that went on with emails going out from the laptop that caused her to suspect that. So I said, let's bring it to the FBI. Laurel said, I don't trust the FBI. Let's bring it to... Then I suggested the U.S. Capitol Police, and I did that because of that incident where Debbie Wasserman Schultz was threatening Matthew Verderosa, the chief of police of the U.S. Capitol Police. He didn't want to give back evidence in this investigation, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz wanted it back and threatened him. So we brought it to the U.S. Capitol Police, and according to Chris Gowan, we brought it there incorrectly. We went up to a U.S. Capitol Police car outside the Capitol, introduced Laurel, said she had evidence in this matter. They called on the radio. They drove us, the U.S. Capitol Police, drove Laurel and I to the main Capitol Police station next to the Monocle restaurant. And Laurel never let me touch the laptop. I never opened it, turned it on. I didn't even hold it in the bag that she had it in. She gave it to the police. They filled out a thing and gave it to us. Turns out that the form said something on it other than evidence acceptance form or whatever. But I can't control that, and we even called them after and inquired, why does this form say evidence destruction or whatever? And they said, it's not being destroyed. That's just the form.
You could trust us.
I mean, I don't know. If you can't trust the police, then what am I supposed to do with it? Open my own investigation? I mean, that's what I'm trying to do. But I don't have subpoena power. I can't force Cox Cable to tell me who owned that account. The very fact that they confirmed that there was an account there at all, I think was a mistake on the part of Cox Cable. I have a recorded phone call of them confirming that, but they're not telling me who holds the account. I mean, Chris Gowan thinks I can like subpoena things. I don't know. Anyway, this Imran Awan character is a very, very slippery, questionable guy who needs to be looked into much further. And when you said a fancy guy from Pakistan, he immediately came to mind. So I put up this prom picture of him, which I think I also want people to recall that there were really very few, almost no pictures of Imran Awan. This guy, unfortunately, is also named Imran Awan, but not the person we're talking about. There were very, very few pictures of Imran Awan on the internet at all until this investigation started. And I want to remind people that this particular photograph was taken right outside the office of Gowan, Winograd, Silva, Imran's defense attorneys. And it was taken one day after our report titled Hidden Network Topology at 4809 Sprayer Street. So my question becomes, if Laurel Everly had spoken with Sean Boberg at the Washington Post 3 weeks prior to even contacting me, she had spoken to the FBI, she had spoken to the Washington Post, and in our first conversation, she told me she reached out to me because she was frustrated that these guys were doing nothing with her information. Now, Charles, is it a coincidence that the day after we release a report revealing evidence in the House that would possibly indicate high-speed transfer of data to maybe a server locked in an air conditioning shed, the next day the Washington Post takes a photograph and then releases a story titled "Intrigue but no evidence of espionage" with this guy's photo on it? What the hell is going on?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. This reeks. It really reeks. And the American public needs to regain. And part of making America great again is restoring the required trust that we all should have, whether we're poor or rich, black or white,
law enforcement,
whatever. We need to have confidence that we can trust not so much the blind people, the courts and the administration of justice. That's central feature of what once made this country truly great.
Yeah.
And we need to get back to that. And one way to get through this, to jump into the swamp and figure out how to burn it down, frankly, and bury it, is going back over this decision of Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who's made many bad decisions.
Yeah.
Appears to have been quite willing to rig the Democratic primaries in favor of Hillary Clinton. We need to really go back over this ground, and I don't trust the judge in this.
Chutkin.
Yeah, in this particular case, and I would urge on this broadcast, to the extent you agree with our views, Jason and my views, please send this broadcast around. We've got to find the truth here. I'd like to close on, actually, it may seem like a sad note, but actually it's I think a positive note. We've learned.
I'm sorry, before you go to the next, one real quick thing, because you brought up Debbie Wasserman Schultz. We also did a broadcast earlier this week with John Mark Dugan, who was in the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, and he created an anonymous encrypted whistleblower site and was basically run out of the country. He was so pursued by the people in law enforcement in Palm Beach County who he was exposing corruption on that he had to flee to Russia after meeting with Seth Rich and receiving files from the DNC, according to him.
So we learned, and it in some ways may strike you as odd that I would say this is an uplifting story. Charles Krauthammer is somebody I have admired for decades, and you think about his tenacity. Here's a person who made a mistake that sadly too many people make of jumping into, I think, a swimming pool that didn't have water in it,
Oof,
And
how did that happen?
well, he was a obstreperous young kid, and I think he was at this point already in Harvard Medical School,
Wow.
and he became paralyzed. In fact, in the very beginning, I mean, like, at first hopelessly paralyzed. And if you read his book and read the summaries of his book, here's a person, and a lot of people would have just said, that's it. I went from being a strapping young lad, enjoying this. Now I'm an invalid.
Right.
He didn't do that. He said, I'm going to finish Harvard Medical School. And allies, students, fellow students, brought him the books that he had to study. He graduated if not at the very top of his class, near the top of his class. He practiced. He then got it as a psychiatrist, I think. He then got involved in journalism. He has one of the most incredible minds out there, grasping way in advance of the pack so many different trends. I didn't always agree with him. No one agrees with everybody else, somebody else on every topic. But this was a great man, great life. He's just sadly announced he has days, maybe weeks left to live.
Wow.
And it's nice to see the outpouring of support for this man, even for people who are on the other side of the political divide. His life is a testament to how strong the human mind can be, the human will can be, and what you can accomplish even with considerable adversity. I mean, I can't imagine not being able to operate your arms and legs or to even talk that well. And he has been in that condition for over 40 years.
Yeah, it's really...
And yet he's written books, he's enjoyed life, he's modified his life. I mean, it's a great story about what truly makes being a human being special.
Yeah, and I mean, so many of us take for granted. I broke my wrist one time and couldn't operate my right hand, and just that was a major impediment to brushing your teeth, shaving, using the bathroom, things that we all do without thought. When you lose that ability, it's very scary. So to be able to excel in the broadcasting world and the medical field, it's really astounding.
And as an author, and I think he's married and this and that. So it's quite amazing. So hats off to you, Charles. Never got a chance to meet you, but admire you and your work. Thank you for everything that you've done. And so we have one small set of issues to close with.
Oh, yes.
I think if you can go back into the slide. Before we get to what's the red letters at the bottom, I think I sent you this just in from our friend Tom Lipscomb.
Yeah.
And Tom is an eminent he's a current author, a former editor, businessman, and he has, it's not that.
Oh, sorry. That was the second just in, I think.
He has a piece on the National Archives that just went into Real Clear Politics today, alleging that the National Archives is in crisis. And I agree with Tom on this. We all have been sitting here thinking about the Clinton Foundation and thinking about the Clinton Foundation and maybe the various Bush foundations, and thinking about now the Obama Foundation. Supposedly each of these entities, and the Clinton Foundation was the first one to operate in the internet age. So, the Clinton presidency. So, the question of what presidential records may have been created or received when Bill Clinton was president is a very big question. We know the Clintons are fond at destroying evidence, hiding evidence, whatever. And
quite skilled.
My opening position on the Clinton Foundation would be that whatever's in the Presidential Library in Little Rock is likely to be maybe half of the records, if that. And so we don't really know the chain of custody and control of all the emails, how many private emails, alias emails did Bill Clinton send out, or Ira Magazine,
I thought Bill Clinton doesn't use email.
Well, that's the official story. I don't believe that story. For a second, I don't believe that. And so we don't really know, and that's not a position we should be in. We're supposed to be a knowledge-based economy. We should know what was created by way of email and what attachments may have been there. And as Tom points out in this article, a lot of times what historians learn the most from are drafts, marginalia, comments written on documents. That's when if there's confusion over what an author intended, that's where you can divine more about what an author meant to say as opposed to what the author wrote or what was published. So Tom is making note in this piece, which I would encourage crowdsourcers to read carefully and to share, is that he suspects, and others believe, that in no way, shape, or form do the documents that are destined to go into the Obama library, if it's ever actually built, contain all the relevant presidential records created or received in the Obama presidency. And that is a real scandal. I mean, people are fond of saying, there's scandal-free presidency. I mean, you do that the same way they search for emails. You say, all right, we're going to define all crimes that may have been committed while President Obama was president as being non-crimes. Therefore, there are no crimes to consider, and it's scandal-free. I mean, it's ridiculous. So Tom's piece is relevant, and I think I began this urging crowdsourcers to consider what this would be like today, what America would be like today, what the world would be like today, and the markets would be like today if Hillary Clinton and Huma Abedin were in charge of the White House. It would be a disaster.
Yeah.
But the fact is that we're not in as good shape as we might be because Jeff Sessions and Rod Rosenstein remain in control of the Justice Department. And I am a very patient person, but I will say right now, without having seen the report that's coming out here, the Horowitz report, that I knew enough a long time ago to say Jeff Sessions needs to go with extreme prejudice, Rod Rosenstein needs to go with extreme prejudice. We need to revisit somebody with experience, a new replacement needs to go back into the Department of Justice and assume that everybody in there is under a cloud of suspicion. Everybody.
What about Judge Janine? She wants to become the AG.
That's a rumor. I've heard directly from her that is just a rumor, but what else might you say?
If you were right, you gotta.
I mean, I don't know who the right person is, whether it's Andrew McCarthy or Rudy Giuliani or...
Not Giuliani.
Well, I just don't know who it is. But it's somebody... I don't think it's just a smart person. I think Janine would be fantastic. It's not just a smart person, even a smart lawyer. We need somebody who can instantly look at a file and say, this approach taken under Obama and then subsequently under Rosenstein and Sessions is not the way it's supposed to go. Yeah. It's at variance for these 17 reasons. Put that case right away in a pile of cases we need to go back over. And we need to be able to do that very quickly. I think there's been, just as a guess, looking at the Clinton Foundation case as one guide, there have been obvious crimes that have not been investigated. There are obvious conspiracies that have been allowed to flourish, and that is despicable. All those people involved with that, it's going to be a wide net, need to be identified, investigated, prosecuted, convicted, and sent away with no mercy.
Now, Charles, I don't mean to redirect you from that particular tirade, but this is something that should raise some eyebrows. You sent this to me earlier, and this is very relevant with what we were speaking about with regard to Mr. Castro, Mr. Trudeau. And apparently there's like a fake eyebrow here that's falling off or something like that. It's definitely reminiscent of the image we had of him earlier. Of course, it could be one of his potato head eyebrows falling out.
It's a little odd to have a fake eyebrow as a man.
I don't know what we're looking at right there, but that was in freerepublic.com, so people can check that out.
Well, also this ear looks a bit odd to me. I don't know if this could be made up. I mean, look at that ear.
Yeah, is Free Republic making stuff up?
Well, if it's a comment, this is a comment, I think. You know, people do send in gag comments. That's a comment.
Oh, you should have told me that. I wouldn't have shown that, Charles. All right, well, no, anyway.
But here is where you would want to go to this.
Sorry, Gateway Pundit, Justin's fake eyebrow. Oh, so they're, oh, well, there you go. That's where it's coming from. Someone called.
And you see, he extended, well, maybe he didn't extend here.
Video released shows the left eyebrow is falling off of his face. It's weird, for sure. That is weird. I don't know why.
Here's a compare and contrast. Yeah, that does look a bit odd.
Very odd indeed. Something going on with his eyebrows from a dentist.
It does look a bit odd.
Something's happening there. Perhaps he's time phone hacking in the way that Quinn Michaels sometimes does with the eyebrows. Now, Charles, this is hardly just in, but it was something that I hadn't seen until it came up in True Pundit. The FBI's embattled Trump campaign spy has vanished. Our friend Stefan Halperin seems to be in the wind, as it were, which I find pretty hard to imagine. The guy looks like he would stand out in most crowds, and actually just seeing this article reminded me of a classic movie clip that you might be familiar with.
There's our buddy.
Oh, wait a minute, why are we getting no audio from that? Hang on, let me make sure we're good to go here. I'm thinking, of course, about the scene from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where they're looking for evidence from Marcus Brody, and of course Harrison Ford has some things to say about how cleverly Marcus Brody can slip away from the Nazis.
Brody's got friends in every town and village from here to the Sudan. He speaks a dozen languages, knows every local custom. He'll blend in, disappear. You'll never see him again. With any luck, he's got the Grail already.
Does anyone here speak English? Or even ancient Greek? Water, no, thank you, sir. No, fish make love in it.
So possibly Stefan Halperin will be somewhere... Halper, sorry. Perhaps he'll be somewhere there in the market.
There he is.
Oh, there he is, yes. So he'll slip away and be in the
There
wind,
he is, right there.
as it were. But that's pretty much all I've got for this week, Charles.
Very good. Well,
Anything else you'd like to discuss before we...
This is going to be a big week coming up with
Yeah.
the Singapore Summit and then the Horowitz Report. I guess we'll do a closing in on Wednesday.
Yes.
You know, the crowd is always very supportive.
The crowd is very supportive, and this is, of course, a community-sponsored resource. So if people are watching regularly, I would encourage them to become sponsors. They can do that at patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, or even make a one-time sponsorship payment at paypal.me/crowdsourcethetruth. The show really cannot continue without your sponsorship. I'm still working to pay back the credit card bills for the travel to New Zealand, and I've been to Los Angeles and Washington, D.C. since then, so people really do need to get on board with being sponsors if they're enjoying the show, or I extend the offer as well to people who hate the show but want to see it continue so they can put in crappy comments, a pastime of many that we've seen. But Charles, thank you so much for your time and for preparing that excellent presentation. Of course, people can download it in the description, the notes there on YouTube and of course on Patreon, our Patreon sponsors. And I will see everyone tomorrow. Thanks for watching.